back last April, I want to say, I had the opportunity, and the pleasure to speak with Webb Pickersgill of Deck9 Games about the remasters of the original Life is Strange and Before the Storm, as well as the game Before the Storm itself. One thing we were specific not to talk about at that time, because in this community we hadn't played the game on stream with everybody yet, was Life is Strange True Colors. Right after we finished that interview, in the next couple weeks, we did go through that game. It was a great time, and the scheduling didn't quite work out. Mostly on my end, I kind of dropped off the face of the earth at a certain point last year. But now we are back, and this is something that we've been looking to do for some time. We finally have Webb back, and I'm really excited for this. We're going to be focusing our conversation tonight on Life is Strange True Colors, which is one of my personal favorite games of all time now. I've played through it 3 times, 100%ed it twice. Absolutely wonderful, wonderful moment. Thank you guys so much for coming, and without any further ado, let's go ahead and start this conversation. Everyone, please welcome back to the stream Webb Pickersgill of Deck9 Games. Webb, how are you tonight?
Hey everybody, I'm doing good. Thanks for having me on, appreciate it.
Webb Pickersgill is the co-game director for Life is Strange Before the Storm, the performance director for Life is Strange True Colors, our focus of tonight, and more recently, the studio motion capture director for Deck9 Games game Telltale: The Expanse, which came out, the final chapter just came out, if I remember correctly, right? In the last month or so? That sound right?
Yeah, and I think it was either yesterday or today, the DLC dropped.
Oh, the DLC just dropped.
Yeah, that's just dropped, yeah.
I am gonna get into that one, but because it's not out on PC, I do have a PS4, so I'm gonna figure out how to make that work, and we'll try and get that one on stream in a bit, because I'm already tangenting, but let me finish the bio. He's worked with Deck9 for 8 years, has also worked as an independent filmmaker for over 11 in multiple roles: producer, director, cinematographer, editor, VFX, the works. He has a degree in music education from the University of Delaware, and is an avid cyclist and runner, and apart from competing in 2 virtual Ironmans, has also now competed in full triathlons, if I remember that correctly.
Been fun. trying to stay active. It's very hard when you sit behind a computer all day.
Yes, I absolutely understand that. Now, we're here tonight to talk about Life is Strange True Colors. And to preface this, I want to read out, since its release in 2021, specifically, what was it? August of 2021, or was it September? September 10th, 2021. And then the Switch in that December. So yeah, September 10th, 2021. It has garnered the Golden Joystick Award of 2021 for Best Storytelling. It won the Game Awards 2021 Game for Impact. The 33rd GLAAD Media Awards, Outstanding Video Game winner. NAVGTR Awards for Outstanding Camera Direction in a Game Engine, which I think is an incredibly unique award, and that's a hell of a thing to win. It also won the NAVGTR Award for Outstanding Writing in a Drama. Video Game Accessibility Awards 2021, Ability to Bypass. Gaming Awards, that's GAY Gaming. Game of the Year Award, Authentic Representation Award, and Best LGBTQ Character in Alex Chen. Full sweep there on the Gaming Awards. And most recently, and perhaps I would say the feather in your cap, the Peabody Award, an incredibly prestigious writing award for Interactive and Immersive. And that doesn't even count the numerous other awards that it was nominated for, including at the 18th BAFTAs, the Narrative, Animation, Performer in a Leading Role category for Erica Mori as Alex Chen, and Performer in a Supporting Role category for Han Soto as Gabe. I mean, there's others I still haven't even listed, but wow, that is a slate to start off with, isn't it?
It's humbling, and it's of course very nice to get recognition like that after you've spent so many years working on something. It's always nice to see that people actually enjoy the game.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah, and I mean, the words are nice, but I really enjoy when I hear from people like you, from the community, and they're just like, "Oh, I played this game and I really liked it for these reasons." And so that warms my heart.
That's where we're going to talk a little bit about that, I think, as one of the things that's going to come in the questions later. But,
yeah.
If I remember correctly, in our last conversation, you all were about to go to the BAFTAs just before our interview. And I think we brought up that slate of awards then. And then now that you've been to the BAFTAs.
Okay.
let's maybe we open there. Let's just segue right into it. How was that? How was that experience, and how is it seeing that kind of like celebration of gaming and being there as a nominee?
BAFTAs were amazing. Again, we were nominated for, what was that, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4 categories.
Oh, four.
Because it was narrative animation and then Erica and Han, right,
yes,
for the 2 performance categories. And so, yeah, there was a huge group of us there representing. Katie was actually there too, Katie Betts. She was just there for the ride, even though she wasn't necessarily nominated. She was just there with the group, enjoying all the energy. And yeah, it was exciting. We got it was cool because, like, sitting in the big auditorium, and I looked back and there's just like rows of people. Everybody's wearing their like really high-end suits and tuxes and all sorts of crazy stuff. And not say I was out of my league, but I was definitely uncomfortable. This is not something that I normally do. Like, I have a suit jacket, that I wear maybe once or twice a year. And then for this, I had to rent a tux. And I was like, how do you even do that? I had to, like, I'm here like measuring my, my arms and my inseam. It was a little uncomfortable. But like, renting a tux and having it, picking it up in London, because I couldn't bring it with me. Anyway, I digress. So yeah, like being there was super fun. Really cool to see everybody like dressed up, and then like while we're just hanging out in like the pre-show and even like after the show, just getting to like mingle with all the other like actors and game devs from all these other nominated games. And because it was really nice to kind of like see them eye to eye, like, oh, you were nominated for this, nice to meet you, and look in the eye and talk about the biz a little bit and talk about their project. Like, I didn't have a chance to play all of the games that were nominated, but some of them I had, so I was like, oh my gosh, I love your game. So that was super fun.
Yeah, I seem to remember like pictures. I think y'all got to meet like Maggie Robertson of Resident Evil.
Yeah. I had actually met up with Maggie at DICE, which was like maybe a month or two before then, with Erica. So it was nice because that was a lot lower key of an event, to just kind of hang out. And, it was in Vegas, so it was a little bit lower key.
That is the 25th annual DICE Awards, right? And
yes.
That's one of the ones that I didn't mention before. It's Outstanding Achievement in Character for Alex Chen nomination.
Yeah, that was nice. We got to go out there and sat in the awards for that, and that was super fun as well. But what's really cute though, like, was that Erica and Maggie just became friends, during this whole time frame, because they were both nominated for actor awards, basically all at the same time. So and also like the LGBT community was just around both of them for obvious reasons. So it was just they're always kind of simultaneously there, and I kind of made fun of them, but I always had fun with them because I'm like, you guys are like C-3PO and R2-D2, because they were so cute. Like, they would stand next to each other, and Erica was like
a huge height disparity, right? Yeah,
and it was just so cute. And anyway, and they just like told me to shut up and laughed and thought it was cute. But anyway, that was fun. But yeah, hanging out with them was really nice. At the so we had the awards, and then after the awards you had like dinner or whatever. And so at our table, so sitting, like kind of next to me, or when it was across the next, whatever. So sitting at our table, I was like, that guy looks really familiar. And I'm like, and so of course, like we all like, we grabbed our phones and we're all like kind of casually like trying to text under the table to like
who is that? Maybe like a quick Google.
Yeah. And oh gosh, I forget his name right now. It'll come to me after the fact. But the VO actor for Hitman. Actually, I want to look it up because I
feel like I used to know this. I used to play Hitman games like a lot more often.
His name, there it is, David Batson or Bateson. So he was there talking, nicest guy, and he actually had a temporary tattoo of the barcode on the back of his neck. Oh, that's amazing.
Did he have like a shaved head?
Oh yeah, shaved head,
okay.
The whole thing, and he wore the red bow tie, which was awesome. So it was like phenomenal. He was dressed as Hitman that night, and it was fun. So that was one of the photos that I got that I was like, this is a cool moment. I'm like, selfie, dinner with a Hitman. It was super fun. So yeah, that was fun. Doing the BAFTAs and then just hanging out in London for a few days afterwards. After the event was over, it was super fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, actually. So after the BAFTAs, because Katie was there in studio for support, it was either the next day or a few days later, we actually had a bunch of people from the Life is Strange community meet up in London, and we had a big get together.
I remember seeing that. I remember the talk being around your Discord about that.
And so that was fun. Of course, it was still like social distancing time. So like there's pictures of us all like sitting in a park, all like really spread out and like trying to keep our distance and whatnot. Cause you know, some people were handling it different than others, but we just ended up hanging out as a group like all night. We went to like a restaurant, we ate, and then I had to split out for something, but then everybody kept on staying and they ended up drinking. We came back and anyway, it was a good time.
That's incredible. And all just in the celebration of the game we are here to talk about tonight, Life is Strange True Colors. And let's dive into the questions itself. So
yeah, sure. Let's
go right to the first one. So the last time we spoke, we talked a little bit about how like you at Deck 9 got the sort of, I guess permission of sorts to take over Life is Strange as a series, right? Sort of like the vetting you had to go through. And so when it came to this one, maybe you can speak to this in different capacities as like both a member of the studio and then as the director itself. Like, why another Life is Strange game, and why this story? What was it that like really jived for you as a studio, and anything that hit home with you in particular?
Yeah, and so I hate to totally just demystify this for everybody here, but like the industry is it's an industry, right? So it's like, okay, we were approached originally by Square Enix, and they were looking to make a prequel to the original Life is Strange. And we were new in this territory as far as we haven't actually released a narrative game yet, but we had demos and we had all the tools and everything. So we had earned the business for them to do Before the Storm. And then really, it's like Before the Storm did really well. And then they had, of course, Life is Strange 2, which was released by DONTNOD. And they wanted to keep going with the series, kind of like leapfrogging developers making these games. And so basically your publisher comes to developer and says, we want to make another Life is Strange game. And we're like, okay, that's fine with us. Like, we love making them. So, the demystified version of this wasn't like that, it was something that came from us and whatever. No, it was business, right? So
absolutely,
just to be honest. But once they say, we want to make a Life is Strange game, that's where the fun begins, because now we know that the publisher is going to, give you the funds to make it. They're going to release it. They're going to, push you through this whole process. Now the burden is on us. Come up with a good idea. And that's where the fun begins, as far as like, why another game? That part's easy. Why this story? That's the part where it becomes a really good creative endeavor between the dev and the publisher, because we put together maybe a half a dozen game ideas revolving around various different characters, and we pitch it to Square, and we like, hey, how about this? How about this? How about this? And they really look at these, and they do market research, and they look to see like which one could possibly be like the best fit, the biggest market attraction. And then this is one of those pitches that we all really started getting behind, because the idea of the empathy was like, like feeling, like our games are about feeling, so like you get to play feeling, like how cool is that? So that one hit a little bit harder than the others, and that's the one that we ended up going with.
I definitely want to dive into that one, into the next question. But before we do, I want to just kind of see what were some of like the other pitches that you maybe threw out there, and were there any darlings that didn't make it through the vetting of like, the studio side of things, where they're looking at it from the numbers perspective versus the creative side of things, where you were like, this was something we liked, but this is where we ended up. Was there anything that died in that negotiation?
So I vaguely remember a few, but that being said, that's one of those that I'm not going to reveal.
Oh, okay.
Because I don't know, because that's a gray area for me as far as NDA. So I'm going to try to keep my job and not ruin that. Valid. But one thing I will talk about, just to go back a little bit further, going back to Before the Storm, that one I have talked about in the past a little bit in depth, because with that, we wanted to do a prequel. So we knew where we were. We knew the characters we had to make the game around. So that one, we said, okay, who are the interesting characters in the existing Life is Strange universe?
If I
you got
remember,
Chloe, Rachel.
I think you talked about like Dana being one of the ones that you had hovered
it was-
around for a while, or Juliet. I can't
Yeah.
quite remember, but
Yeah,
I remember
those too. But basically, we went around to each of those major or side characters and said, what if the game was about them? What would that look like? And we spent time like developing each of those side characters. But when it all came back around, Chloe was just the most compelling one.
Yeah.
Now the one that it was a challenge because she didn't have a superpower, or none of them would have anyway.
Yes.
Right. So whatever you pick has to be compelling without a superpower. And that is, anyway, Chloe is compelling.
Chloe is very compelling. Let me ask you this before we dive heavily into Alex here, but let me ask you one more question about this. When you were, let me, and if this gets a little too close to the NDA, that's just let me know and we'll move right in. I got plenty of material. But the thing I want to ask you about here, in thinking about like, oh, well, you had these past games. Did you initially consider in these pitches that didn't make it past cutting room, did you consider pitching a direct connection to the prior games? Or was it always like, we want to be different? We want to be distant. We want to start somewhere fresh and make this purely our own.
Yeah, I think the intent was fresh and new, right? There was, because we had done the Chloe and Max story, with sewing that whole thing up, right?
Yeah.
So it was like, it's time to move on. Let's do something completely original. And if we were, let's just put it in Colorado. That's what we know. So it was fun to kind of really bring it home and make it something that we were all very just emotionally invested in. So
yeah. All right. Well, then let's use it as a springboard to talk about that fresh direction that you took. Let's talk about Alex. Right. Alex Chen, somewhat orphan. The first scene we get of her, and I don't know if you can see this, I'm on the stream right now, we're playing a little bit of the clip of the game itself, where the first scene we get of Alex is just a wide shot on her talking to a therapist in her group home. And let's talk a little bit about how did you come to conceive Alex as a character? I know I've heard in other conversations that in early drafts she was very Chloe-like in some of her abrasiveness, but that isn't obviously where we ended up. But really, starting at the conception of it, you talked about the empathy before, and how did that inform the person you wanted to create?
What's really interesting about just the development process here is a lot of times you don't know. It comes into focus as you're making it. It's not like, you have a really good idea of what you want to make, but then as you start making it and as you pick your lead actor and as you start making those scenes with that actor and you're making choices and you're seeing what they bring to the role, that actually helps focus you even more on, now we understand who that character is. So as we went, Alex became Alex because of what Erica brought to the role. And of course we had, the plot that we had written to that point and all the circumstances. But even after we filmed pretty much all of episode 1, they still changed the story. So the direction that I was giving Erica on set at, the first couple scenes that we shot was completely different than the last 3 episodes. Her character, her motivations, all those things completely changed. For an example, we were shooting her, they're called gameplay idols. So it's just, when you're controlling the character, they're just standing there, look like they're doing nothing. And we have to record a bunch of fidgets. So little things where, you scratch your neck, it makes it look like, the character's staying alive when you're not moving them around. And one of the things that was written at the time was that she was, they had pursued the idea that she was a cutter, and that she had, she was going to expose at some point, her arm was completely cut up or, scarred over from that. And if I don't know if it actually made it into the game or not, it may be in there, but part of her idol was she had this fidget where she would do this. And she would constantly pull on her shirt to make sure that her arms were covered because she was very self-conscious about that part of her life. So we, that was one of the original directions that ended up not panning out. But we were shooting content that kind of, leaned in that direction. And then later it was no, we're abandoning that. it's too heavy, or I forget what the reason was at the time, but like,
I can
so
understand.
they have all these ideas, but they have to narrow it down, because if you have too
Right.
many pieces, then it just becomes a mush.
Yeah,
So
I had a theater professor who once, talking about devising work or creating work, is essentially you're giving your audience a series of letters and telling them to spell a word. And if you have too many letters, they're going to start spelling. They're either not going to be able to spell the word properly, or they start like spelling words that have nothing to do with the letters you put in front of them and what you wanted them to spell. Right. So that I understand that. And definitely as someone who's worked in devising art and even in like D&D campaigns where like, you try and like steer your players in a certain direction, that idea that you mentioned of finding out who characters are along the way is definitely something I experienced both as a player and as a DM, right? Where I as a player, I think of my longest serving character, a 3-year character who the person I started as did not, not the same person I ended as. And I found out so much just by the interactions along the way. But springboarding off of that, I did want to discuss something else. That idea that you did say you abandoned. I don't think any of the idle animations made it in that I can remember off the top of my head.
Yeah.
But it was interesting because I actually did wonder if that was something like the idea of self-harm was something that Alex was going to reveal, given some of like the interaction, some of the journal writings. And I think this is something you said you started directing Erica on while it was like in process and it was later taken away. So it feels like to me, part of that, even if it wasn't spoken, still made it into the information of the character, right? It didn't get lost along the way.
Yeah, there's a lot of things that may have been vestigial, like that made it into the game accidentally. One of the pieces that we ended up reworking to our benefit was the moment when she sees Gabe on the bridge and they're like, "Hey, how's it going? Hug or not? Awkward moment, whatever." That awkward moment was originally written because Gabe was going to be an abuser. And it was going to be the story was going to have taken a turn where he was the silent bad guy, so to say. So there were versions where that was happening.
Oh, wow.
But like, again, it evolves because you see the characters, you see the actors in life, and you're just like, how could you make Han Solo a bad guy? You
I mean, I'm
can't.
certain his villainous portrayals, if they're buried in like cutscene footage anywhere, I'm sure they're brilliant. I'm sure they are. Because
we never actually recorded any of those. It was like the subtext around, because it was early scene, so we're still like getting to understand. But like the idea that she was hesitating and wasn't sure because there were maybe some bad memories, or she wasn't sure. We didn't have it completely in focus, so we just had to kind of play it a little vaguely. Now later, as we they said, "Oh nope, that's not the thing. Gabe's going to be awesome, 100% best brother ever, and we're going to make Dad and we're going to make Jed bad guys." Sorry, spoilers, guys. But like we're going to make those guys bad guys. And then 2 years at this point, I'm not going to be apologetic.
Yeah, fair enough.
So in doing that, they're like, okay, now what do we do with that footage? And we do a process that's called change management. So at any point, we can be like, well, we have to change something in the game, and you write it up about what we need to change, and then it goes to all the departments to figure out, okay, what do we need to do in order to make this change happen? And for MoCap, it would be, well, you have to reshoot the scene. But luckily, we were creative and said, oh, wait, what if we kept the MoCap and instead made that awkward moment a reveal of her power? And that way it's like, and all that we had to do was pick up one line from Han saying something like, "Oh, this is so awkward." I forget what the line ended up being, but like it was just one liner, and you have him glow a little bit. And now, right? It's instant. Like, it looked like it was supposed to be that way, but it was just the magic of the writing and the narrative team looking at what we had and said, "Oh, I know how to craft this." So it was great.
That's got to feel good. And I think, you've worked in like film and video games for a really long time, and you've gotten to work on projects that you had full control of the script. And I got to say, that's got to feel really good, where it's like you see these moments and you're able to shape it instead of, just having to take someone else's words and make it happen, or someone like you would have to do with most theater pieces that aren't new theater pieces, right? Mm-hmm. And I think that's definitely something that's very cool about the industry that you work in, and it seems like it's worked out for the best. And I'll personally say that I can't imagine a story with an evil Gabe. I can't. I mean, I can imagine it'd be a great performance, I'm sure. There is a scene late that I think I do have a clip of that I am going to show later, right? But there's a moment there where I'm like, oh yeah, so obviously Han Solo can hit the dramatic moments, and there's a reason he was nominated for a BAFTA. It was a brilliant performance. let's move on. This is the first question from my community. This is from Vanna, and the question is a bit of a two-parter. And I think we touched on it a little bit here, but in connecting the prior Life is Strange games, what inspired the choice to bring back Steph, and then specifically to move her from like more of a minor background character in Before the Storm into a main character in True Colors? And more specifically, the follow-up to that is, was the decision based on the reaction of the fan base, right? We talked last time about how, the reaction to Steph was huge and visceral, and I think that's, you're able to see that in the way like that Katie's popularity has, the Katie Bentz, the portrayer of Steph, has like, risen in sort of visible voice actors from that portrayal. And you maybe not expected that initially off of the creation of the first game, but was the decision to bring her back partially based in that, or what did it just like, is it one of those things where you saw the dots and it's like, oh, they connect here, this would just work, and because it's your property, you were able to do it,
Right. And really good questions. Let me see if I can flesh them out one at a time. So in Before the Storm, when I read this character Steph, I was like, okay, cool, not a big deal. And then I saw the first concept art of that character, and I was like, oh shit, this is gonna hurt some people. I said, this character is gonna hurt some people. Like, just knowing, that she was gonna be gay and all those things. And I'm like, oh boy. And then, then trying to find the right voice was really hard. I think I forget if I said this before, but anyway, like we got like 50 people auditioning for Steph, and I listened to all of them. I'm just like, no, these are all just like generic sounding people. There's no character in any of these. And in a batch for another actor, I even forget what Katie was reading for, but it was for some other character. I just paused in the middle of them, like, hold on a second. I backed up and I listened again. I'm like, oh shit. Yeah, that's my Steph. Like that, she wasn't even in the right pile. But I found, I'm like, yes, no, that's our Steph. And I moved her over and she made it through the rounds or whatever, and I ended up hiring. But like, yeah, I don't know. Like there was just something about her voice and her deliveries during her audition that I was just like, yeah, that is the character that matches. What I would do is when I listen to VO auditions, I'll have the concept art and I just stare at the concept art and I listen and just see, does this feel right? Because it's a visceral thing, right? It's not like you're not checking boxes or anything. You're just like, oh, it feels right or not.
I don't want to interrupt you, but I have like the funniest story to relate to you from like the voice actor perspective, is that voice actors, if we are given in the audition sides a picture of the character, like we will do the same thing. Like we will stare at that picture, right? And we will just like try things until we're like, is that right? And have the same sort of visceral connection to that image to try and put through the performance so that we like, and that I guess sometimes that just connects on the other side of it too.
And the hardest part is like, as a, when we are casting for a role, we can't put out, concept art like that's like, because super hush hush about everything that you're doing. But we do want to give actors an idea, because when like a picture says 1,000 words or whatever, the phrase is, and it's so true. You can be like, oh, I know who you want just by looking at the picture. You don't even need the description or anything. So what we would do is we go out reference hunting, and you find, okay, what actor does most people know from what movie that just kind of incorporates what we're looking for, and we put that in with the audition, and then that helps them kind of steer where they're going, and that usually does help. I don't think we did that though for Before the Storm. Before the Storm, it was just text, and here's what you do. But all right, so
bring it back to the main question, bringing her into True Colors.
I'm getting back there. So now, I wasn't part of the conversation where the writers decided or thought about or brought up. So I don't know what the origin of that idea was, but as soon as I heard wind of it, it was as visceral as the moment I said, that character is going to be awesome. It was like, yes, we have to bring this character back. It just made total sense, because she was like the hit, other than, Chloe and Rachel and everything from Before the Storm. She was the standout character of all the others. So yeah, let's take her. Let's keep extending her story. And so like as a concept, it was great. And we started developing the story around it. And then about couple months into the development of that, all of a sudden I was like, hold on a second. And I pulled Zach Garris aside and I'm like, I just thought of this. I'm like, I don't know, Katie just did voiceover for us. I'm like, I've never worked with her other than, I mean, I was at the VO sessions, but Philip Bach did all the voice directing. So I hadn't actually worked with her directly. And also I'd only heard her voice. I hadn't seen like her live action performances. So I'm like, not a risk, but like, we need to check this out to make sure that, before we get too far down this road, that is this going to be viable? So anyway, we did some stuff with her and just to make sure that things were there. And she grew into the role. At first, I would say things are a little rough, but I think everybody is with, doing motion capture for the first time.
Oh, because we've talked about the suits before, and that's like a whole other thing if you're a performer.
You're like, you got this thing on your face and you're trying to act and you're like, what is this? And you're wearing this sticky suit and it scrunches everywhere. It's a pain in the ass.
And I think even if you've got like film training, right? Like the camera and like know what you're looking for, that other one, like right in front of your face, like acting to that is just a whole other kind of deal.
You have to ignore it. That's the thing is like, you have a camera in your face, but you literally have to look right past it to the actor. And to make it worse, Katie had film, experience, but there are no real cameras on set. We have reference cameras, but they're not cinematic cameras. Usually when you're on set, you're like, okay, I can feel the cinematic camera here. So
I'm pointing to this one.
I'm going to cheat out a little bit. I'm going to make sure that, I don't do anything dumb, like turn away from the camera. So, but there's no sense for that. So you're kind of like flying naked. You're like, I just have to perform and hope that the digital cinematography later looks good. And you just don't know. It's crazy.
Yeah.
Right, let me see. So did I actually answer the question? Because I you know me, dude. I'm like,
I think we covered it, right? It was like, why bringing Steph back? Like, what inspired that? I think we covered that, and then Yeah,
I don't know what inspired it, but I do say as soon as I heard about it, I was like,
that's it.
That's the first cheerleader. I'm like, yes, do that. Please do that. And then it was like, all right, hold on, pause. Are we sure we can pull it off? Okay, yeah, we can pull it off. Yes, please do that. Like once we knew that she was good, we were good.
Amazing. And I think, again, that was a huge connecting point between the two, between like just, connecting it to the franchise. Everyone's like, I have this storyline in my head. And it was never touched on in the main game, which I was very appreciative for. In keeping that spirit of keeping it separate. But in speaking about True Colors again, we talked a little bit about this, and it's okay if we like don't touch on the NDA restricted ones. But Alex's Power, you said like locking on the empathy one was kind of like a big moment for you. If there were any other like powers that came to mind, if that can skate the line, I don't know. But didn't make it out of cutting room floor. And then how was developing that as both a gameplay concept and a narrative concept? Like how did that flow? And where did you end up like spiraling back on things, being like, nah, that isn't going to fly this way? And where you ended up, and how you felt about where you ended up with that?
We did have at least one, maybe two other power concepts around Alex as a character, but empathy was the clear winner. The other ones, actually, I don't think I will talk about because they were a little tumultuous internally. Even.
Oh, okay.
And I don't want to, twist any.
Not reopen the old wound. Yeah.
Yeah, let's not do that. But where we did land was great because it's about empathy. It's about other people's feelings and what is life is strange. It is about feeling, it's about that connection with other characters, and having gameplay that helps highlight that and helps pull you into that was it just made sense to do that. And then there was even a point where her power, we had this idea of like, you have the auras and all that, but it wasn't until like halfway through development, maybe, where Matt Van Cleek, who's one of the sound designers for the game, he actually came to Zach, the game director, and said, hey, I want to be able to pull the trigger anytime and see anybody's emotion. And Zach just kind of, that's a really good idea. It was one of those moments where it's like,
weren't expecting it, but like
that is going to cost us so much effort and time. But you are 100% right, and that's what we need. We need to be able to it's like at will do this emotional thing because that's what you can do. Like you can just reach out and and feel what they're feeling, and to make that part of the core gameplay in some cases. So we actually, let's say, back to this drawing board, but we definitely took back a little bit and said, okay, how can we gamify a real-time user-controlled thing, and that again helps direct the narrative. We actually had some content that wasn't there, and then it started showing up after we had the on-demand power ability, and that's cool. But that's where gaming influences the narrative, because they are tied together at the end of the day. You can't just all right, little rant maybe here.
Oh, no, yeah, no, I can feel it.
You have your standard games, which your run and gun or your fantasy sword slashers, and they have these huge open worlds and lots of people you can talk to. But those relationships you have and those interactions you have with people they're just interactions most of the time, because the gameplay is, I'm going to go shoot some stuff or I'm going to go slash some stuff. And this conversation I'm having with you doesn't necessarily tie into that. It's just like,
oh yeah, we know those
my
scenes.
Next quest. Your next quest is over there. Great. Okay. And then you go and you slash them.
Oh yeah.
Whereas, tying those together and finding a way where the gameplay itself is the reason that you're talking to these people, and you find a way to meld those two together. That's where I'd like to live. That's where I like our games to live. Any way we can do that. Yeah.
Because and that's a principle for guiding like really strong narrative in general. It's just tying in the added element of how does a person who is in control of the character interact with it, right? Because a lot of like film, and this is someone who works on film, like, or just general storytelling, is like, how do we inspire the next bit of action? Like, how do we get from here to the next scene, right? And it's almost always like better when driven by, oh, well, the character needs to do this so that they end up in the situation that triggers the event, right? And now you're just literally in a situation where it's like, oh, well, now we put that power into the gamer's hand to feel the physical need to do the thing. Versus like, I've definitely played games like you described where it's like, yes, intermediate quest. And, and those can be good games too, right? I think like, obviously, like the Skyrim is a great example of a game that I think is like that, right? Where we're not building on need, necessity, or even timing, right? But it still is obviously a great game. It's 10, 12 years out, right? And it's still getting like mods and remasters and things like that. It's still getting played frequently. So, that is not necessarily a measure of whether a game is good or bad. But for me personally, and I think for you as well, for narrative gaming, I think that's a necessity. And I think it's what makes it stand out when you are able to tie those things together so neatly. And I think that's something that finding the way to do that with this power. And right now on screen, like I'm seeing, we're in the flower shop with Eleanor, and this moment was definitely one where it's like, can you talk a little bit more about like the reflection visually of how so part of this mechanic, right, was in the big scenes with his power, Alex would walk into how the other person viewed the world. And I think this, I clipped this example from my playthrough because this particular scene was so emblematic of that. The way words got twisted, everything went on jaunty angles, like the way that Eleanor in the throes of dementia perceived the world was scary. And where did that come from in terms of like the design of these moments?
Yeah, we explored the idea of, if Alex has, empathy, okay. A lot of people have empathy. Great. You can really feel for another person. But what does a supernatural version of empathy look like? Well, it happens, in that case, it happens. It's so strong and it's so powerful that it overtakes you. Like you actually feel what they're feeling and actually can, perceive that. And we're like, oh, if we can do that, then like, what are some situations we can throw this character into? Like, what are some crazy situations? And of course, from the bad, which is, what does it feel like to have dementia? Like, how can you create a world and create a level that like feels as uncomfortable and awkward and confusing as somebody who would go through that kind of situation? And all the way to the other side, which is like happiness. We'll get to the RPG later, but like the LARP later, but like like in the mind of a child who has the biggest and best imagination, like that is a great place to be as well. So, and then of course everything in between, like what happens if you took that emotion away from them because they it's too much for them and you want to take it, and like, okay, and then that's Charlotte's experience. So like we looked at all these options, and there were more obviously than actually made the game, but like we're looking at like the best ways to intertwine that narrative with that power. And like you were saying, like give the controller to them and let them make that choice. The word that you're looking for, it's passive protagonist.
Thank you.
Like just film writing or whatever. And for those of you out there, a passive protagonist is where the protagonist is on their quest and they're just like, okay, I'm just gonna do the next thing, and there's no motivation for it. It's just, and then I do this, and then I do that. There's no motivation. Versus, a really good story, the lead character is asked to do the next thing. It's like that, it's absolutely has to do it.
I'm gonna drop what might be a nuclear lava take. My chat knows my opinions on this, but I'm a really great example of that in film that I think everyone can understand and relate to is the difference between Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man and Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man. And it's not their performances, it's what the writing has them do. In the original Sam Raimi Spider-Man, stuff happens to Peter Parker, and he reacts to it very frequently. Every time. He's there to take photos at the Thanksgiving Day parade, and Green Goblin rushes in and causes a problem, so he has to react to fight him, right? He's there at his newspaper, turning in photos, and the Green Goblin attacks J. Jonah Jameson to get the location of Spider-Man. So he reacts, which brings him to his conversation, which is what like turns the city against him temporarily, which is why he's like, maybe I'm not doing the right thing anymore. Right? It's all of these different things. He is even reacting to the actual final fight, right? He doesn't pick that fight. Goblin kidnaps Mary Jane and forces him into it, right? And it's true across all three of the movies. He is always reacting. And The Amazing Spider-Man, the first one, Mark Webb's Amazing Spider-Man, is a constant series of Peter seeking out the next thing, right? The big one is like he goes after the 00 algorithm, and to do that he has to find Dr. Kirk Connors. So he seeks out Dr. Kirk Connors, which is what creates Lizard in the long run by giving him the 00 algorithm that creates his enemy, right? He is hunting down the guy who killed Uncle Ben, which is what leads him to the conversation with Gwen Stacy's father, where he realizes that revenge is not justice or being a hero. And that leads him to the bridge where he confronts Lizard for the first time and chooses to save the kid instead of pursuing Lizard, right? It's like this series of compounding events that is all based off of what he chooses to do.
I never thought of that. That's really pretty funny, actually.
I've thought a lot about it.
Apparently, that's awesome.
Earlier this year, I rewatched like all of them again, and it just like it hammered home. It's a personal obsession. I had a video go viral on TikTok. Like 1 million people saw me talk about Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man performance because I'm obsessed with it. It's so good. But that's not what we're here to talk about today. But I did want to bring that up because that when I think about the passive protagonist trope, I compare the two. I always compare the two, right? Those two are like the clearest example that I can think of it.
Now here's something. This is a tangent on a tangent. So I'm acknowledging that we are starting to
get into we're in the weeds. Okay. We're in the weeds.
We're in the weeds. But I heard something the other day, that just made me just dumbfounded and go, wait, what? Indiana Jones. Do you know the thing about Indiana Jones?
I'm about to find out.
It's not passive protagonist necessarily, but literally the movie would have happened exactly the same way whether he was in it or not.
Like Raiders of the Lost Ark, you mean?
It's Raiders of the Lost Ark. Yeah, it would have happened exactly the same way.
Oh, because he failed.
In it or not? Because he was just along for the ride, and then they opened the Ark anyway. Everybody died, and there it was.
My God!
Matter he was even in the movie or not, and it's hilarious.
That's fascinating.
Obviously, I'm doing it not justice. You have to look up a person who did the analysis to this. It's brilliant.
I'd be fascinated to know that.
Because it's along those lines of like, it's like, did it even matter, or he was just anyway? Really,
that's incredible.
Okay, now coming back
to True Colors, the reason that we're all here, the big reason we're all here. We said we were going to talk about it, so let's just go ahead and dive right into it. Let's talk about the LARP, the live action role play, what is essentially what I would call the game within the game.
Yeah.
And I can only imagine that's like, did this feel like getting to design a different type of game while still getting, it's like having your cake and eating it too, right? Getting to design the narrative, role-playing game, but then also getting the chance to be like, what if we also made a Final Fantasy type game, right? What if this is Kingdom Hearts, and suddenly, insert new character here in Kingdom Hearts because that's what it does. I don't know. I haven't played since 2, so I don't know Kingdom Hearts lore anymore. I'm sorry. I've lost the thread. I've lost the plot. But, what was this like? And was it very, very different for you to try and pivot so severely? That severely is the wrong word, but I think what I'm trying to communicate.
It was fun. That's the first word that comes to mind. It was fun. So I remember hearing, like, again, I don't know what goes on behind closed doors. The writer's room is like this mystical place that I normally never have time to visit. But like, I understand how it's run and I've heard it run before. But basically, they get together and it's a lot of yes-anding, improv, and like putting stuff up on the board, and massaging it and seeing where it goes. But, at one point, they come out of their room, they open the door and they say, okay, we're going to have a LARP. And, and I'm like, oh, that's cool. Just as an idea, that's cool. And then when you actually want to do the LARP, it goes into your traditional, was it JRPG? JRPG, style thing. And I was like, hold on a second. I had to look it up because I didn't know that acronym at the time. I was like, oh, that's going to be awesome. Like, as soon as I understood the concept, I was in 100%. The best part was recording the animations for the gameplay, because you got to totally stand there and go back and forth.
Here we go. We got this actually coming up on screen right now. Like, this is,
oh, is it?
It's literally, it just entered the first battle. And I was just like, that's incredible. Because looking at that, it was just like, with the second this scene starts, I was like, oh my God, we're really doing this, huh? I lost my mind the first time I did this. I think the one we're watching is like the third time, so I'm probably not freaking out as much. But like, this was something else for me as someone who loves JRPGs as well. It's like probably my other favorite type of game. And so like seeing this moment was just absolutely fantastic, and just I was surprised how seamless it felt. I was stunned. I was just like, because I was like, oh my God, this is so self-aware in a way that I think people who love both of these types of games will enjoy.
Yeah, it was fun. It was fun. Doing the voiceover sessions, because we have to do the body animation separate from all the VO lines, because you never know what you're going to pair them up. But just doing the body animations was fun. Trying to find just that right balance of like the swaying back and forth, and then you do the little individual strikes and the different
exertions. Yeah, you had to go through like the normal.
But then when you do the voice, it was like, okay, do the line. And I'm like, oh, come on. Yeah. You can do better than that. Like, you got to think really bad, corny video game now. Hitman, let's go. Like really over the top, super fun, have fun with it. And, and then Erica was digging in like, what was it?
Yeah.
Like, whispering winds, like, or whatever it was. Just like declaring it at the top of her lungs. I'm like, yes, that's it.
Well, if you say the name of the attack, it's stronger that way. I think that's
of course.
That's the law. That's the law.
That is the law.
And then I think towards the end of this, the video will eventually catch up to where our conversation is. But there is the ending part of that in which, again, we had the meta connection of Alex's powers of reflecting a person's perception onto the world, into you as the player, in which up till it did catch up. Nice, amazing. Up until like the point where he grabs the sword, you're living in a make-believe. You're still in Haven Springs, but after that, suddenly, full costume, full magic, fully real. Yeah. The music itself changes. The way the spells go off, everything is different. Was that always part of the intention? And how did that, like, steering towards that? Like, was there that moment of like point A, point B? Aha, I see the line.
Yeah, I remember hearing the pitch for it, and once I understood what they were going for, I'm like, yes. I mean, it makes total sense, because if you have you set up this LARP as I'm not feeling so great. Well, come on, maybe this will help you, right? So you're in that mode, and then you find the moment that makes him absolutely, you're Alex, you can't help but be affected by that. And when you are, now you get to see through his eye. I don't know. It all just, sometimes like writing is just so brilliant the way it's set up. It just kind of writes itself. Our writers are great. I love my writers. But yeah, that was, I think, a brilliant decision to have it play out that way. I don't know if it was originally intended or if that was. Sometimes these ideas come from the end and work backwards. Like, how do we have the LARP where we can have full costumes and everything? And what if we did this? Yeah. And that's funny. I was just watching the clip while you were talking, and while I was watching that transformation, I got a little bit of chills. I was like, yeah, it holds up. It feels good. Like watching Alex go, wait, what is going on? And looking around in that moment, and you're just like, oh, what just happened? You're just excited.
And that's one of the great things about the performance itself, right? Is that it's a very honest performance, and this is. I know Erica comes from a theater background. I also come from a theater background. We talked about this a little bit. Is like there's something the idea of being honest in a performance that is very hard to achieve, generally speaking. And then to translate that onto a separate medium in which you are not actually doing the physical performance per se, right? And making that a very honest reaction, I think is another layer that makes that moment and these moments like very, very strong beats.
It's hard because it's like green screen acting. You don't have any indication of what's going on. You just like, by the way, later, this is going to be this. And you describe it to them. And they're like, okay,
cool.
And so,
great.
All right, now act. That's your job. But, like when we captured the mocap for this, we didn't even have, I don't even think we had concept art for it yet. So like we couldn't even show Erica, hey, here's what it's going to look like for her to go, oh, this is going to be cool. She just had to imagine
it. Oh my God.
You're in the middle of a fantasy world, like Lord of the Rings style. And how cool would that be? That's the best I could do. And she brought what she brought. So
it's visually stunning. And I think it's one of the things that makes this particular like title stand out in a way is that idea of like what came of the game within the game and still keeping it connected to the reality and the truth of the game you had already spent 3 chapters creating, or I guess 2.5 at this point. Moving forward, and it's like even thinking about just like this moment here, which turned out to be a pretty brilliant piece of foreshadowing. I don't know who's responsible for that one. Let's talk about creating a unique villain for a game like this, right? The Life is Strange series has always danced a line on villains, right? Because a game like this doesn't necessarily lend itself to you have a big fight at the end and you beat the villain and everything turns out okay, right? And so the original like dances pretty heavily on that because the multiple different ways in which Jefferson can go down, right? Or what happens to Nathan, which I think no matter what is a bad ending for Nathan. But regardless, they're very unique antagonists in their own way. What was it like creating Diane and Jed, who were 2 very human people? Very, very human villains, right?
Yeah.
Diane, who operates from somewhere trapped in corporate hell, and her crimes are of complacency, or being complicit and complacent. And Jed, who kind of got lost in both his own legend, but also the expectations of everyone around him, neither of whom set out to do evil, but even so, not only perpetuated it, but in Jed's case, actually actively continued it.
Yeah. One of the things that I know our writers strive to do is to make sure that we talk about this in the just in the studios, you don't want the mustache twisting villain. Like that is just, I'm a villain for the villain. I'm going to tie you up to the railroad tracks. All that nonsense.
Before we go farther, it's just very interesting given the facial hair choice for Jed is literally the most waxed mustache I've ever seen.
Literally. Oh gosh, that's so funny. But we, generally speaking, other than the actual character choice there, we try to stay away from that archetype because it's one dimensional and in a game where you want to connect with other humans, in the game, they have to be believable. And if they're just, I'm going to be evil because I'm evil, then you'd be like, well, that was dumb. So, the writers, I thought, were really brilliant in the idea that they found a way to have just a series of small bad choices that just dominoed and he couldn't get out from underneath. So he just kind of wrote it as long as he could. And then eventually it caught up with him. And I could see that happening. Like somebody just like, you know what? Nobody knows. I made an awful decision. I feel terrible about it, but it got buried. So I'm just gonna go with it. And you know, he even tries to, you know, not to go Team Jed here, but like Steph and Alex are talking about, oh, has Jed told you about the thing? He walks over, he's like, you don't want to be talking about that. Like he even tries to, you know, like, you don't need that, guys. Like, so
he feels the weight of that own legend like sitting on him, and because he knows the truth of it, he wants nothing to do with it. It comes across as him being a humble hero, but it's actually motivated from that guilt and self-loathing.
Yeah, I would imagine that, you know, the writers talked about that a lot in the writing room, because, you know, they have these long conversations with the writers about motivation and those kinds of things, and I would guarantee that they've talked about that, and that helped influence the dialogue and influence those small moments that help bring out that character. But you know, the fact that it was so funny. I remember it was like episode. Oh gosh, I can't remember. Because remember, for me, it's been like 4 years, even though it came out 2 years ago. I was shooting a lot of this stuff like 4 years ago. So my brain is a little foggy right now. But I remember shooting with Steve Austin, and you know, we're shooting a great actor. I love him as an actor. He's so just like controlled and all the things about Jed and him as an actor. And then we're like, by the way, Steve, just so you know, Jed's going to be the villain. And he's like, wait, what? like we didn't know. Again, one of those things that kind of steered itself as we made the game. And he was like, okay, this is going to be cool. So, but what was nice is that he didn't know for a very long time. So there was no accidental hint of any of that in any of his performances, you know, so he was just being the nice guy. And I think that helped. I think if he knew, he may have been tempted to throw in little things.
Twirl,
you know, but
because you want to do that as an actor. I understand, like it can be very tempting to, and it's like as a director, you'd be like, not too much. We can't know that. We can't know that.
Yeah.
I see what you did there, but it's like pull it back in. But I think truthfully, actors love the note to take something down, because like it means that not only have they achieved what they were trying to do, but that you saw what they were trying to do. And so being it's like less of that, they're like, okay, great. That tells me I'm doing something right. You know, actors will love that.
And then if you get it past the director, then you're like, okay, I got one in there.
I do have a friend who's an actor who just keeps upping his performances until a director tells him to stop. And several directors that I've worked with on shows with him have made the mistake of not telling him to stop. They just think he's going to pull it back in, and they don't realize how seriously he's committed to the bit. And what ends up is like the most clown shit possible. It's beautiful, it's hilarious, and we all have fun as part of the cast, but it's every now and again it's just like, oh, you didn't know what you were getting into when you hired him.
Okay, so and tangent, we're not going to do this on the stream because it would take up too much time, but I'm going to throw it into chat.
Go right ahead.
Quote. So if you search for happier with your mouth open, watch that video. Have you heard of it? It's Whitest Kids You Know.
Okay.
Sketch. And talking about like one-upping or just like never just, it's the funniest thing I've ever seen. Watch it on your own time. DM me afterwards.
Absolutely.
And it's hilarious. Yeah, it never ends. All right.
I will take this point in the conversation to say, hello, chat. If you are just coming in now and you haven't been here before, once again, I'm Dan Pixel. I am a Let's Play streamer, and I love the Life is Strange series, and I get to conduct this phenomenal interview with, of course, Webb Pickersgill of Deck 9 Games. And we're talking about Life is Strange True Colors. While we have started off with, and we're midway through our list of pre-assembled questions, if you have a question that you would like to ask, please hold on to it till the end of the questions, and then I will call for it and just drop it in the chat. And the way it's going, I feel like we'll probably get to it. It feels like a pretty chill night, and we're vibing. Yeah. This is about as, you know, we were saying beforehand, it's like we can riff off of these pretty well, and I think once again we've managed to capture that. So once again, thank you for dropping by, and let's get back into the interview. One more thing about villains in True Colors before I move on is Diane. I do want to talk a little bit about Diane as a character and what sort of like directing that was like, because much like Jed, she gets caught under the weight of things because I guess maybe she believed in Typhon, or maybe, you know, whatever the motivations are for that. That's another moment with a villain who maybe didn't want to be a villain and definitely wasn't trying to be a villain, but felt trapped.
And that's what makes it real. It's, you know, she is definitely a villain from the perspective of Alex, but from the perspective of Diane, she's the victim. Like she got screwed. Like, and because she was she worked very hard for her position where she was, and she didn't want to mess that up. She wanted to keep climbing that corporate ladder. So she was trying to do all the right things for the company, but there weren't the right things. And she was stuck between those two. Yeah.
That's, it's like, again, unique villains, and the way that you craft them is grounding them in that reality. And it's like something that could happen to just anyone else. What I find is the most interesting is the way the parallels between the events that started Motion and where the protagonist chose to go made their choices that ended up differently versus where the villains ended up going in this particular instance, right? Gabe found his way out there because he chose to follow his father, and when he found that he couldn't find any more information, he chose to, settle and make a life for himself and be happy without it, right? And Alex is a compounding series of choices that lead to eventually her own happiness, which is something that we will come back to later. But as we're talking, let's move on to the next thing. Let's get a little more into the nitty gritty of it. Let's talk about, we've touched on it a little bit. Motion capture is something that has been very unique to both, I think, the games, the Life is Strange games that Deck 9 has done work with. I think it was back in Before the Storm, there was a little bit of motion capture. They're not full performance capture versus the full performance capture of True Colors. This is a very unique form of video game performance for a lot of different reasons. Is this something that you, as someone who's worked in video games for a long time and still does, is it something you see it as the future of all gaming, or is it still going to be very specific?
Oh, good question. I would say motion capture is becoming more democratized and more easily accessible by most devs. It used to be that you had to have huge studios with, $500,000 worth of gear to even capture anything. And now they even have, some free markerless capture where you can just have a couple video cameras and open source software and do some stuff.
That's incredible.
It'll figure it out. It's not like great yet.
Yeah, I wouldn't think so.
It's accessible though. And that's cool. And then of course you have like Unreal Engine. They just released recently their facial animation capture software. So you just walk up to an iPhone and it will like really scarily accurately capture your face and your voice and put it onto a metahuman. And and that's free. So like all of these pieces, all these elements are starting to come together to make it more accessible for people to create games this way. And of course, you're always going to have to, hire your actors, get really good actors to do the parts for the game to be any good per se. And also, not every game needs motion capture. You don't need motion capture for Pac-Man, you could
always make.
You could, like you just you walk around or whatever. But so it's not going to be for every game, but I know going forward, especially for any kind of game that is trying to elicit that emotional response, you see another human and you're trying to make that connection. Yeah, motion capture is definitely going to be around for a while. So,
do you think, in terms of the way that you've done direction for it, is it still in the case where it's like the things that are not talking about like the future technologies of like doing the free scanning or whatever, but in the technologies that you've already worked with so far, one, do you find it easier or harder to work with in terms of performance, like the performance you get out of performers with it, versus other medium, or just like your normal voiceover work? Is it like, easier or harder, and do you like the end product better? And I guess the second question is, do you feel that the techniques are like codified enough in terms of like how you get those performances out as a director, or is it still like there's a sea of what we don't know?
Yeah, it's still Wild West. Because technology is changing so frequently, there is no, this is how you do it. It's everybody kind of does it a different way. I had a chance to go out to LA earlier this year and meet with a bunch of different mocap studios to kind of do tours and, just kind of get to know the rest of the community out in the world that does mocap. And it's funny how we kind of figured out what we did as we went. We got a system, we learned what we learned, and we did a thing. And then I went out and talked with a bunch of other studios, and I'm like, yeah, everybody is doing the same thing. We all kind of came to the same conclusion about how you do it. And, small differences here and there, but for the most part, we all figured it out. But that's the thing, is we have to be figuring it out because it's always changing. And we're always like, oh, well, it used to be facial capture they did for Detroit Becoming Human was
Oh,
markers
yeah.
on the face. And
I've seen
that,
some of the videos
course,
of that. Yeah.
yeah, right. It's crazy. But you, of course, you can't track eyes. So eyes had
Mhm.
to be hand animated,
Yeah.
but you get everything else for free. Now we have facial capture with the helmets. Now that introduces issues of it's in the way. You can't do hugs and kisses as easily and those kinds of things. So it's the technology is changing. So the techniques have to change to accommodate for that. I do see it, as it evolves, it'll be, well, we need to make it easier, right? Think about it this way. For a video game to be produced, and if you have these funky face helmets on and you want to do kissing scenes, it's expensive because you have to capture it once with the face camera. You take that off and then you do the thing for real. And then you have to animate between the two and it's a pain in the ass. So when the technology comes along that allows people to just not have to put anything on and just act, and somehow we can just capture it. Yeah, we're going to do that.
Yeah, that's going to be so much easier.
Better games, faster, cheaper. Yeah. So yeah, there's definitely we want to make it faster and cheaper and stuff because it's just a pain in the ass otherwise.
Yeah, fair enough. Understood.
Yeah.
Let's talking a little bit more about like production elements and other things that went into the behind the scenes. You and I have talked about like the way that music shaped Before the Storm, and including your own contributions as the bassist of Pisshead. And if you are not familiar with Webb is actually a very talented bassist as well, and you can actually find his work in Life is Strange Before the Storm as the aforementioned Pisshead. But something that was very unique to this game, and I actually, in looking at the question, I actually missed out on the other more important one. There were two major musical releases as a part of this. The first of which, obviously, as I've listed here, is mxmtoon, as both as the singing voice of Alex and wrote an original song for the end credits, as well as I think another piece of her music was included in the game somewhere else. But also Angus and Julia Stone, who are from, they have a song pop up in the original Life is Strange, and it's one of my favorite sad songs of all time, Santa Monica Dream.
Right.
A devil to play though, because it's in a weird tuning. It's in a weird tuning, and I don't like that it's in a weird tuning. But I think it's like Open G or something. But they came back and did a full album for this game, and not just like in sort of an inspired by the game. Those songs crop up all throughout, and in fact, are some of the characters' major themes. And I'll say this before I turn this over to you, is when I first played the game, I had one critique of it, which was I felt like Alex didn't have a theme music in the way that like Max and Chloe's theme is so directly iconic to the original game. And I think it's called one of the daughter songs in Before the Storm, the one that plays in the title screen, I think of whenever I think of Chloe, right? The dun 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 dun, dun, right? That bass riff, I think of that every time, and starting up that game, it just makes me think of it without fail. And even in Life is Strange 2, there's the Two Brothers theme, right? And I felt like Alex didn't have that initially. It was on my second or third playthrough that I realized that it's actually the song Tears is the one that from Angus and Julia Stone's album is the one that the accompaniment plays through in all of Alex's major moments. And it took me a while to realize that. But that's the one that plays during some really big moments, including like the kiss with either Steph or Ryan is like one of those big moments, but it's not just there, it's other places too. And that's the dun, 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 dun. I can't do it right now, but like if you haven't listened to Tears by Angus and Julia Stone, it's beautiful. It's one of my favorite songs from the album. But that's like one of those things where it's like these two pieces, two artists that you got to contribute to this. Was there anything in terms of like how you played with that in the narrative, especially like because mxmtoon was also the singing voice of Alex, and you know, what was it like getting them on board with this, or like even any kind of things with that? What was that like, or even in the final product, seeing what it turned out to be?
So first of all, like kudos for all the homework you've done, like the analysis of everything. I was just fascinated by hearing all that, because here's the thing, like I actually don't have much to say on this topic because motion capture is done and that's like put into the game, and like music is like so detached from all of that. And it's done you know, wait, who did music for? That was Chuck, right? Yeah. So Chuck did all, coordinated on our side with all the music creation and everything. And I don't know what those conversations looked like. And I didn't even, get to really hear them until they're playing the final game, which is like way down the pipe. So I don't know what that process was. I know what it was for Before the Storm. And we would get some songs from them, and we would hear them and give them some feedback about like the tone of what they were trying to hit for for Chloe's theme or for Rachel's theme or for these other characters that we're trying to capture this emotion. And then, they would just give us the songs all with different stubs so we can, pull out different aspects of it and remix it and have variations on a theme throughout the game. And I assume that it was similar for this game, is that, they probably went back and forth with the artist and gave feedback and whatnot, but I don't know for sure. So, but your analysis sounds like spot on as far as like the different themes and everything. And I think that sounds right.
I guess it's partially one of my hyperfixations. The soundtrack to the original game was one of the things that really hooked me on it. And in fact, I've saved the full like playlist on YouTube of the original soundtrack, and I found out things about the Max and Chloe theme, for example, and this might interest you as someone who plays guitars. Most of the tablatures that try to write down the Max and Chloe theme get it wrong. Do you know why? This is my favorite piece of like stupid Life is Strange lore that nobody knows or cares about except for me.
Yeah.
So Max and Chloe's theme by Jonathan Morali is a beautiful piece that most tablatures are wrong on because they don't realize that it is a 2 guitar piece. And that seems pretty like you think when you listen to it, you're like, oh, they've set the arpeggiation underneath on just like a pedal, and then do the overlay, which is right. What most people don't realize is there is a second arpeggiation being played at the exact same time. It took me like 3 months of listening to it to finally suss it out. It is while the D chord is being arpeggiated on the first guitar, it is a bar G chord on the lower strings being arpeggiated underneath it on the other guitar. And when the first one moves to the A, the second one also moves to like a barred C. And they stay in that, they're perfectly timed, and they even overlap a little. They hit the same notes at the same time. And it's one of those things where it builds over the course of the piece because Jonathan Morali is brilliant. I could talk about him for days and days and days because not only was his collection of arrangements the first one absolutely spot on, but that piece in particular, the one he composed specifically for this game, is a piece about 2 different melodies that reconnect over time and build and grow together. It's the most like obscure piece of any musical shit that I know, but I love that piece of music so much, and for years I tried to play it and couldn't figure out why the fuck it wasn't sounding right until I found that out.
But again, your music analysis there is spot on. As far as like that sounds great. I'm not like confirming that because I know anything. It just sounds
different game. I just like,
but like
I wholly like, if you want to take this into your own headcanons, please do. You're a music major. I was a music minor, right? And so like I have the things that sit in my head from time to time.
No, that's cool. But think about it. If you're a professional musician and you're writing this stuff, you know how to write notes and you can write songs and everything. You're past that at that point. You're like, I've written songs. What am I going to do that's going to be that nobody knows but me? And it's like, I'm going to have 2 melodies that come together and nobody will know except for like the 2 people on Reddit that figure it out. And, and that's cool, and for those people that figure it out, you're just like, cool. All right.
And I'd love to talk to Angus and Julia Stone about Tears because Tears is underneath this scene that's playing right now. This is the romance scene with from my playthrough, because I actually had this up to chat. I had chat vote on it because every time I played through, I'm like, I'm gonna do Ryan this time. And then this was just poor Ryan. Poor Ryan. I love Ryan. He's wonderful. And he does not get enough love, frankly. But I will say my first playthrough, he betrayed me at the end because I can't remember whose vote I lost. I think I lost Oh, I lost Charlotte and I lost Ethan. I lost them both my first playthrough. Which I fixed in later playthroughs because that was just devastating to me to have Ryan turn his back on me. That was devastating, frankly. Which is why I know I love the character. He just losing him was devastating. So let's get back on track. We went down a whole weed. That one's my fault. We went this time. I was the one who got us in the weeds. Let's get back on track.
I'm sorry. I'm like watching the scene.
Oh yeah,
without any audio.
It is a little weird. I didn't want to overlap anything, but it's like
it's so
my favorite part of this scene is the way like this is the first time Alex's reality like expands outward from her joy, right?
Yeah, and
just paints the sky. I thought that was visually beautiful. I don't know whose idea that was, but that was gorgeous. Yeah. That is one of the pieces, and we're going to come back to this in the end. I think you know what question I'm going to come back to this up for, but like that moment is just one of several that I love for a whole host of reasons. But moving forward, we've talked a bit about like the building of it. You're an artist, and I have done direction before. I know, direction, like sometimes you're like, that was like a grand slam, or sometimes I was like, maybe I could have got something more out of that. What was your proudest moment of direction during the making of this game? What was the moment that you remember that like whatever you said changed the performance for the better in a way that whenever you watch it or see it again, you're just like, I did that. I said the thing at the right time, or I asked the right question, and that got the right result.
That's a hard one. My short answer is I don't know. The so because here's what would happen. We get on set.
Mm-hmm.
I've done my homework. I have an idea of kind of direction that I want to go or could go. We do take one, and Erica just be like, yeah, that was great. Like, I don't really have any notes. And I'm like, okay, we're going to go one more time because sometimes like her scene partner, there'd be something I'd give to them. And we go again, and I'd be like, damn it, like that was good too. Like, because the flavors are the same thing, So a lot of times, so as we went, I basically put Erica on autopilot, and she knows this. I'm not worried about you. Just do what you do, because like we had done so many scenes in the first couple episodes that I was able to say, okay, you know what you're doing. We are on the same page, because we work together like all the time. Versus the other characters, they come in for like a day or two, and then I don't see them again for a month, right?
Yeah.
So like these other actors, I'm like, Erica, you know this character, you know what you're doing, you understand the story. She's super intelligent as far as understanding what's going on and why. So didn't need to micromanage that. So as far as like a direction, not to say proudest moment, but the thing that I'd like to do is watching her scene partner and making sure that the scene partner for Erica was always there and always in the moment, because it's very easy, and this being an actor, like where you could be like, okay, I'm alive and here's my line and everything's good.
Yeah.
Hey, here's my next line. And I'll let you know, like, you can see them either searching for the next thing. They're not staying in the moment. They're just waiting for the other person to finish, or they're just not thinking about being in the moment. And most of the stuff, it was just reminding people, like, no, okay, after you say this line, what are you doing? Like, what is your goal there? And, reminding them like, oh yeah, okay, when they're saying that thing, are you surprised by it? Are you excited about it? Like, what is it that they're saying that's motivating you to say the next thing? Oh, and once you remind them of that, then it comes to life, And it's so I didn't have to like micro direct, but I did have to be like, you need to like fill in the gaps here, and then they would, and it'd be great. So
if I didn't already know your relationship with Meisner, like I think this would be a really good jumping off point for it, because that is the thing, right? And I agree wholeheartedly. Like, active listening is, I think, probably the most useful skill any artist can learn, and it's, I think, the thing that for me as a person, like, learning to do active listening better has improved not just like the way that I perform for acting reasons, but also as well, like, as a D&D player, like, and a DM, it makes it so much easier, which is performance in its own right. But even just like in day-to-day life, like, active listening changes everything. So whether or not you have an interest in acting, if you haven't pursued any kind of Meisner training, I highly recommend it, because it just sort of it'll change the way you look at the world. But that active listening does, I think, bringing that out is so important, and not letting that get caught in the wayside. Okay. On to a little bit of a longer sort of in-depth question. And I think we kind of like touched on it a little bit in an earlier conversation about Steph. When we talked about the original game a little bit, I remember you saying that like maybe not expected the reaction of the LGBT plus community to like the story of the original game in the way that it was. Because like in the way that you played for the first game and didn't realize until afterwards and saw other people being like, oh no, that's like they're totally in love, right?
Yeah.
In this game, did you not only anticipate it, but deliberately and unequivocally centered queer characters in this game? From like the first moment that you like can actually control Alex, if you read through her journal or her cell phone and her texts, you can immediately discover that she is bi or pansexual. And the original games kind of left that more ephemeral in the choices, right? Like you didn't have to. You might not never know if you played it through a certain way. Was that driven by the understanding that the queer community has a huge connection to this game and wanting to more front and center their stories in this particular regard?
I think, like, I don't want to speak for the team here, but I'm guessing that there was an amount of leaning going in here, like just leaning into that idea a little bit more. It's like, hey, look, we have a huge community here that loves these games because of these reasons. And even, Life is Strange 2 came out between them, and they have, a lot of choices around that as well. So
yeah, Daniel is also a confirmed queer character.
Yeah. So it's like, well, this is not just that this is the franchise, right? Because I don't think that is necessarily true. That it's like, this is a franchise thing. I would say it's just a reality thing. This is like the way life is these days. These who are people these days. People are out. It's not a big deal. Like I come from an older generation where, it's like, is this person gay? Like, well, nobody would ever know. Like the person would never come out. You would never actually know if, there's things you talk about in, quiet conversations. It wasn't part of life. Yeah. And nowadays it's just, no, I'm gay, I'm queer, whatever. Like people don't care about it anymore. And I think that the games that are being made now reflect that honesty and that where we are with life. And characters are gay, characters are straight, whatever. And Alex just happened to be that. Now, did we lean in a little bit at knowing that the community is already there? Maybe, you know.
And I'll definitely say, like, Steph is the favorite child of the Deck 9 collection. So it kind of lent itself to that. And I always say it's like, when I play through Mass Effect as a game, that I say it's like there was a favorite amongst all the companions, and it's clearly Liara, right? And you can kind of feel that in the same a little bit. The Steph is the favorite here, so it did lend itself to that. But I will say, like, I am definitely older than a lot of fans of this game, I think, in a lot of ways. And I can still remember growing up in a time where we were, first off, having queer stories was very uncommon. Having queer characters was incredibly rare. And if they were either joke stereotypes or they were villains because they were queer, right? And then you had Disney's thing forever, which was like all the villains have queer mannerisms, which was weird and confusing for a host of people, I'm sure. But for me now, as an elder millennial, I guess I am officially that, and what puts me on towards the elder side of the queer community as well, this is one of the first games that I had ever played in which I was like, I am fully in control of a queer character that feels a lot like me. And I mean, there's a lot of other reasons for that too, right? Like I am Asian American Pacific Islander. I am a queer person, and I also have a lot of other similarities with Alex, including like I actually, this is a weird thing, I'm synesthetic, and so as a certain therapeutic technique, I sort people's emotions based on color, and I've been doing that since 2013 actually. And so when this game was first announced, I was just sort of like floored by I was just like, excuse me,
this is my game.
I was like, and I will bring it a little serious here for a moment. This game was announced immediately after the shootings in Atlanta. The month of, there was a series of anti-Asian hate crimes in Atlanta in March of 2021 or February. I can't remember, but I remember like that was one of the worst weeks of my life. because I was thinking about my mother like walking around our neighborhood, that she had started like doing in that point in time. Like she had started taking it walking around the neighborhood, and I just like I spent 2 weeks associating, and like I was trying to like pull myself out of it, and this trailer dropped, and immediately I was like, not only is like, oh, this is centering a queer Asian character, something that is incredibly rare in video games, even recently. Like there are very few queer Asian protagonists I can point to and I'm like, there's one, right? And on top of that, to be like someone who has magical powers in the way that I like therapeutically like organize my brain, right? And I never felt so connected to a game at trailer before. So cool. That's one of those things where it's like, you're right, bringing those stories and that honesty at the front, like lets people like me and other people who I know are in this community see themselves on screen for what might be the first time, right? For me growing up, I had Keanu Reeves, really, who's not a queer person, but is a mixed API person who, I do love Keanu Reeves, but it's different. So I guess for me in the community, I just wanted to say thank you for that. Before we move on to the next question, I said that is it's important to us, and we appreciate that you commit to it. So thank you.
Sure. And I would also just go forward saying that seeing your like white hetero male movie is so boring. Like there's like so many movies that are just, like your typical movie where it's
I've watched all the James Bond movies.
White people. Yeah, right. It's like, okay, those movies have all been made. Great. Okay, maybe there's a few still out there that need to be told that can only be told with that lead character. Yeah. Great. Go make those movies. But like they're boring. Like it's like, this movie is just like the other thing. Oh, they've got a little special thing, but otherwise, there's nothing special about some movies these days.
It's not a different or new story. It's not you're right. It's a story that is, a lot of these come from stories that have been told before.
They have been told. But there's a huge wealth of stories that come from only the environment of LGBTQ. Like those stories just don't exist in a white, cis, heterosexual environment. And there's a wealth of new stories to be told. So yeah, I see that like both games and films, they're going to start making these films because they're more interesting. There's no more like regurgitating Hollywood crap that, like, let's remake that thing because that was successful. Like new original stories, which is going to be super exciting. And not to mention, it's going to go ahead.
I was going to say, and even within mediums that had felt like they were getting dried out. I mean, so people make comments about the MCU all the time and the way it feels kind of stale. And yet, despite like superhero movies having a fatigue, Aquaman is the highest grossing DCEU film of all time, right? Centering Jason Momoa, a Pacific Islander as Aquaman.
Okay. I mean, that's cool for that statistic, but that movie, I don't know how.
Oh, I love Aquaman. It doesn't take itself so seriously. I love that movie. But Black Panther and Wakanda Forever too, both outperformed any of its peers. Miss Marvel, which is one of the TV shows in Phase 4, which is like one of those things that people are low on, overperformed expectations by an exceptional amount, because these are unique stories that haven't been told, even within a genre that feels stale. And so I think that's something that you're touching on. And again, committing to that, like you from where you come from and what you do for that. Thank you for that.
Yeah, I try the best I can within what I can do. Yeah, like Disney was good. They've been doing better about this over the years, right? Like making stories about people in parts of the world, like actually embracing the culture and everything and the character and telling a story that only could be told in that region has been a good way to break out from just the white American story, which is really boring.
But we talked about stories getting told. Let's move on to the next question, which ties into that a little bit. Now, when Life is Strange was completed and they announced that there was going to be a Life is Strange 2, DONTNOD Productions very famously said that they were moving on from Max and Chloe because they felt every part of their story was told, to which I actually agree wholeheartedly. The first time I saw the quote, I was like, no, that's 100% accurate. I think that story is fully told out. Everything you need to understand about them is in there. Although the comics are nice. I have read the comics. If you haven't, they're great.
Yeah.
But it was not like a necessary story to tell in its own right. And so they moved on to Daniel and Sean, right? And so my question to you is, with the characters of True Colors of Alex and Steph and Ryan, your like main focus protagonists, do you feel that all of their story was told? Or do you feel like these characters have something else that they can offer as characters do? Because in a certain regard, Chloe had more to offer just earlier, right? That's where Before the Storm comes from in its own right. Now, I phrase this question very pointedly because I understand, and I am not asking you to tell me if there are future games. I would not do that. And so if without skating the line into NDA territory, do you personally
you're
feel
being very nice about this, by the way?
I understand the NDA struggle.
Yeah.
Do you feel that there are stories left to tell? And if you feel comfortable providing examples, please do, but you do not have to.
Yeah, I think so you've got like Steph and Ryan specifically, right? So like, is there a story of how we got to see Ryan to where he is in True Colors, and is that story interesting? Maybe. I don't know. That one's, I don't know. Like, you know some of his backstory, but you're like, what from there could you really pull out and draw into its own really satisfying, thing? And then you've got,
I guess Steph has wavelengths, which like does tell a bit of her time
a little bit
right before. It doesn't tell you about Izzy and that whole time touring and where she went like immediately after. But I think some of that is touched upon in wavelengths in a way that I think makes it pretty clear. But I guess not even in the past, but like maybe towards the future. Is there anything that you think that they could tell from where they left off?
I think Steph can always use something, because she's just
obvious
so
favorite,
and cool, right? Like,
obvious favorite.
It is, and she's my favorite. And I love Katie, and she's great, and all that. I would love to see at some point some sort of other Steph thing, but the challenge there for pick any character, and it's like, okay, we want to make a thing around this character. It is just a huge deal to really consider the ramifications of, okay, we've got this character. Let's say you pick, I don't know, Diane. I'm just going to pick a random character, right? Yeah. So, all right, what if we made a story around Diane? Okay. Is her story maybe getting to Haven Springs that compelling? Like what, and also, is it too weird if you pick a character and you find this amazing story that gets them where they are? Does it seem a little weird that everybody has this like amazing, huge, crazy backstory that gets them there? Then it starts getting a little like, I don't know, that's a little weird. Or after they left, if their story just got crazy after they left, it's like, but some people it does make sense. Like I think Steph is a wild one, and some crazy shit would happen down the road. Diane, maybe not as much.
Yeah, maybe not Diane. And like I always ask a question because it is very common nowadays to just see tied in sequels that maybe started off as like from a production side, maybe started off functionally as another game, right? But a studio realized that if they tied it to a property, it might make more sense. And sometimes that happens with really big products. Like I'm gonna be honest, I'm not exactly sure why there is a game centering Sephiroth for Final Fantasy VII. That confuses me a lot. I don't understand that. I'm not convinced that Sephiroth had a story to tell. We'll see that the jury's out on that one until the game comes out. So I will withhold my judgment, but I will admit my skepticism just on the merits of it, right? And so like with a series like Life is Strange, right, that has multiple games in an anthology context, which means they don't have to relate to each other at all. It's always interesting to see if you're like, oh, this character would be really interesting to explore. And I was always curious if like when you finish a game, sometimes or like finish a story, you're just like, did I tell everything that I wanted to with that? And sometimes the answer is definitely yes, and sometimes it's just...
Yeah, I think that for the sake of the game, for the sake of the interactive piece of that, we wrapped it up pretty well. But that's where I think the brilliance of different media comes into play, right? Because you can, didn't Katie end up doing a VO for like, was it a book or something that was written about Steph?
Yes. I remember seeing that.
Like a spinoff. So like, that's an example where, okay, Could Steph do a whole nother game? Maybe, you don't know. You have to
So
find
you have
the
to
right
ask
story.
the medium.
But a book, an audiobook, a comic, so there are other mediums out there that still allow stories to be told, but in a format that is just more conducive to that story.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I'm thankful for those kinds of things.
Yeah. And I think I speak for everyone. It's like, of course, we'd love to see these characters around because we love them very much. But I also am a big fan of, narrative integrity. And I understand if we never see them again. Which is, again, why I was like very happy that Life is Strange 2 had, one reference to Max and Chloe, which is a great reference. It's a great little picture. It's a great little side quest that you can totally miss. But that was it, right? That's on narrative integrity. And there are definitely big name properties that maybe shoehorning everybody in isn't the right thing to do, Star Wars. I'm just saying.
Do you have any opinions about that?
Not that I have any opinions about C-3PO and R2-D2 being the entire prequel section. It's fine. It doesn't matter.
They were the defining thread that pulls the
okay.
Series together, but that's cool.
Okay, let's move on. So getting into sort of like the grand picture again, and as someone who worked on the direction of the performance and every piece of this, what is the biggest thing that you want people to take away from this game and this story?
Yeah, interesting. It's I think it's just the idea of community, right? So Alex was alone, effectively, showing up to a town, having nothing except for the duffel bag on her back.
Yeah.
And meeting her brother, which is something you can hold on to, but then that disappears. And what's left? It's it's a small town, so getting to know the people in your community and leaning on them and community. So I mean, I might have more than that, but I think that's really a foundation, right? It's just the people around you, the surround you, community.
And that's a really positive and strong message to take away, right? And this actually leads me into the next question. And we touched on this a little bit earlier with one of what I described as my favorite moments in that Steph scene and the joy of it. It is well known amongst people who play Life is Strange that there is what I would call the Life is Strange dilemma, right? And this dates back to the original, right? Okay. This action will have consequences. And the narrative themes of that game all lead you to, it's if you do A, this is what happens to this is the consequences of that. And sometimes you don't want that. And True Colors maintains, I think that is the core mechanic, right? That remains the same, even though we've dealt away with the time travel, right? If you take away Charlotte's anger, she loses her ability to feel it and doesn't know who she is anymore, right? That is the consequence of that action. It is a trade-off that positive and negative, right? This game series deals with that and has a history of making your final decision one that can either, no matter what, you lose, right? If you save Arcadia Bay, you are forced to watch Chloe die in a bathroom alone. Real fucked up thing about that is it's before you even meet her in that timeline. It's a whole thing. It's really, really bad. If you choose to save Chloe, an entire town gets destroyed with a death toll that is never truly calculated. And that is really, really bad. Depending on how you communicate between Sean and Daniel in 2, you're looking at you're running across the border. Either you go to jail, your brother dies, there's 4 different options, but none of them are purely good, right? And most of them end up with you in jail. Before the Storm gives you the choice of letting Rachel keep an illusion of her mother to cope and be safe, or breaking the truth to her, which might damage both her relationship to you and even to her mother, should she know who she really is. Right. This game did something so unique in that your final choice that you are given is between two options that are not negative consequences. You can choose to stay in Haven Spring and live a life there and be a part of that community that you talked about. And that is a huge selling point of the game. And I think I agree with that. I think that was something that I took away from the first playthrough was Alex spent the whole years and years looking for a home that she kept getting kicked out of ones that she never found. And the game dealt her a tragedy by killing Gabe in the early one, the only one that she still had left, and she found another one over her time here. Mm-hmm. Or she can choose to go on tour, but she does not do it alone. In most endings anyway. Like the most common, it's very difficult in terms of the gameplay branch, if I understand the way it breaks down, for her to be alone at the end of this game. And she can choose to take that person who is now a part of her life connected, someone who chooses her, something that you make clear in the text from the beginning, that she is deathly afraid of not being chosen. And especially in like the big scene that's Han Soto's big performance, play your role, right? Like that scene is a devastating moment. You realize Alex's greatest fear is not being chosen. Yeah. But she can choose this other life away from Haven Spring and still be chosen. It gives two positive options that fulfill your character. What made you step away? Or what was the reason? Like, and even if this wasn't like in your hands at all, stepping away from that dichotomy that has been known through the series forever. What led you to that? Were there moments where there was a more negative dichotomy? And what does it feel like to break the cycle? And do you feel like this is maybe the right way to go forward if there are more in an anthology?
It's interesting. I don't know if I've actually ever thought of it that way before. So, but yeah, I guess, yeah, it is true. It looks like we've broken this cycle, if there is such a cycle. And what I would say is more than just specifically, yeah, we tried to do this thing. The highest level thing that we're trying to do is always have a unique playing experience. So if you always, we're very conscious about, okay, we have this story. Okay, is this too similar to this one? Does this just feel like we're doing this again? If so, how do we make it the same but different? You know, and this is one of those things that we've talked about, which is, like major choices at the end of a game. Mm-hmm. How do you make it not feel like Bay versus Bay? Like, oh God, it's just another one of those. Like, how do you make it feel different in some way? Whether it's like the way you put it, which is like not two bad options, cool, maybe they're two good options, cool. It's the same, but different. So I guess overall, not specifically that we're trying to break the cycle, but that we're constantly trying to keep the narrative interesting. And keep the choices interesting and the consequences interesting. Because at the end of the day, life isn't always the happy ending, right? I mean, that's just like the villain, and you have your white male stories. All that stuff has been done, and I say it's boring, but it's like predictable. So how do you have endings that are maybe just more realistic or more believable? Did my email come through on yours?
Maybe
a big ding.
I heard of something. Yeah. I wasn't sure what that was.
That was me, probably, because I have my audio turned on to go through.
I thought I missed an edit in this clip of like trying to mute all the audio, and I did all the.
That was me. And all right, now I'm getting. Hold on, let me just turn off my email so that I.
But you see, this is the choice presented to you up on screen, guys. This is the stay in Haven choice or seek adventure, both of which are like strong choices. And I think this is like. Yeah. I can see my hand movements. I must be having the same conversation that I just had with you to my chat at that point in time. I have rants, and they're very the same rant half the time. But I will tell you that like from my experience, that was part of it. Like I was dreading getting to this point the first time I played through, because I was like, I thought, we just solved the Jed problem. What can possibly be next here?
Awful thing.
What awful thing is waiting around the corner? And I realized that finishing this game didn't make me feel sad. And that sounds like that's too broad. Let me be more specific. When I finished Life is Strange for like the first time, I sat with what I did. I chose the Bay. The first time I played, I chose the Bay. So I had to watch Chloe die, and I sat with what I did, watching the credits roll, and cried because I like the weight of that like sat with me. And then even before that, the first time I like even watched half a playthrough, I was thinking so hard for days about like all the different implications and like what that meant. I couldn't pick up the game to play it again right away afterwards, right? Like it was its own other thing. I wasn't able to do it. Same thing with like 2 and Before the Storm even. It was just like, whoa, that's heavy. I gotta like think about the way that I have made choices in my life to end up here. And this time, I still thought about like the way that choices shape things, but we got to the end of this and I was like, they're happy. They get to win. I want to play this again. And like a week later, I played through again. The first time I played through, I played within two weeks, I think I played through twice. Because that changed the way that I felt about it at the end and the way that my energy was coming out of it. Because for once, just like Ninth Doctor says, like just this once, everybody lives in a, except Gabe, but like, still.
Yeah. It is interesting. I guess I hadn't thought of it that way, but I think the interesting thing of the story is that it's different. Like you get to choose a path forward, and those paths forwards are interesting, regardless if they're bad or good.
Yeah.
Right. So I think that's maybe the takeaway for us is just like, we just want that the choice to be compelling and the satisfaction of those two choices to be, well, satisfying. Be like, okay. It may be sad, satisfying, but I guess in the case of True Colors, it was happy, satisfying, which I'm okay with.
Yeah. And again, like it's one of the things I think cements this for me as one of my favorites of all time. Only game I've ever pre-ordered also. I wasn't disappointed. Okay. That covers like most of the main core of the Life is Strange questions. So chat, we're getting close to the end. So if you do have questions, get ready to drop them in chat. We'll follow up on those, but I've got 2 more here that I want to cover. First of which, this one's a little more free reign, not related to True Colors. So last time we talked, I remember I had to go back and rewatch it because I was like looking for it because I thought I remember talking about it. We were talking about how Telltale shaped decision tree branches at one point. We were talking about it in the middle. And then of course the most recent game you just dropped was a Telltale game, which we're not talking about now because I haven't played it. But I've started playing Telltale games and I love them. I understand now because I hadn't at the time, but now I'm like I understand. Right? To the Telltale Batman, it was phenomenal, and the way those like decision trees go, I love it. I'm very excited to play more Telltale. Now that you've done like these kind of RPGs and you've got a little bit of JRPG in there, and you've got to do a Telltale game, which is its own type of narrative. What sort of story would you want to tell of any IP that you can think of, big or small? And what type of game would you like to work on in the future?
Right. I am working on some concepts and pitches. We all are. Everybody's always working on a concept or pitch at this point. But one that is the generic version of it is multiplayer narrative branching stories. So the idea of having, like you're making choices, but so is the other person that you're interacting with. And so your experience is not going to, like, I could play it once right now and I could make exactly the same choices, but actually it would be different because they're making different choices. And I think that is really interesting to me. There's a lot of technical challenges and the logistical challenges of making that work. What happens if, the person bails halfway through the game or gets disconnected? Like, how does the game keep going? There's like 100 different questions, but just like that format of understanding that decision trees aren't just one-sided. Like there's multiple things going on. And what if you added those choices into the game? You can't have the same player making those choices because then you could just stack the deck in your favor and have everything come out the way you want. So having that random idea, or the random input from somebody else is impacting your story is really interesting.
No, I haven't really played these myself. Is this what like the Dark Pictures anthology sort of does? I've seen some playthrough that it seems to be multiplayer, and it seems to be like you can fail, which means the narrative can bend based on success or failure of one player or another player. So kind of.
You're right. I guess they have done that.
I don't really know much about that gameplay, so I won't. If I'm barking up the wrong tree, it's totally fair.
No, you're right. So like, just like, your choose your own adventure narrative game, the first game came out and was like, oh, that's a cool idea. And that has spawned like an entire branch of games that are exploring that idea of choice inside video games. Same thing. They
Yeah.
created that anthology, which has 2-player choice. Now that like opens up its own genre of games that I think there's a lot of room there to explore, to make it interesting and see what makes it fun.
That's so fascinating, and I think that's like both like as a like from a designing standpoint, like challenging in an interesting way, and also like fulfilling when you achieve the narrative in the way you want to. I can see that, and I understand about decision trees as well. I think I told you last time, and I haven't touched it since then, but I tried to. I for my own like fun conceptually, I tried to see it's like, what if I took every Life is Strange game and like tried to link them up in the future, and what different like paths would that take, and how would I start that? And I can tell you that like I couldn't even figure out some of it, because I had like 4 decisions from Life is Strange 2, 2 from Life is Strange 1. True Colors really has like 2 but really 4 different endings depending on who you romance, and just trying to connect all of that in my brain was a nightmare. And I drew it out on a flow chart, and I was like, holy shit, there are 64 choices before I have made it to the inciting incident. And I was like, this is fascinating from a puzzle perspective. I love the puzzle of it, but oh my god, I can't imagine trying to design one of those on a...
Yeah, it is mind-wrecking. And we do, at points towards the end of a project, we will start looking for moments that we made a choice that haven't paid off, like looking for opportunities to pull in choices to make sure that they're paying off. To make that web of choices even worse, more complicated. You're like, oh, hold on a second, we have an opportunity to pay off a consequence here. Let's do that. Little things, and sometimes it can just be little. It doesn't need to be this huge like Bay or Bay thing. It could be like, this person said this line instead of that line, and it just feels, wait a minute, they brought up that thing from episode 1 that I said. Okay, that's kind of cool.
It's all about connecting it. And again, it goes back to that, like designing it for the player, right? What makes it different for the player versus someone who would just be watching the narrative? I mean, that's good game design. All right, and last question we have on the list. This one's a bit of a throwaway. This is a bit of a community joke as well. The question, I believe, comes... I have to check who submitted this one in the Discord really quickly. Let me take a quick look at that. This one was submitted by... where's events? Here we go. Oh yeah, it is Selfie. The joke, so it's a bit of a joke question. It's like, what brand were Alex's glasses? And I will give you the background of this question. Is that
I needed to hear the backstory.
This is now an inside joke in my community, because when I first played through, I was like playing through, and one of my mods was like watching me. When Alex falls down the well and gets to the bottom, she's like, what, like 3 broken ribs, and just like, that's a massive like shaft. Like how she survived, I have my own theories as to that, but it's like unharmed glasses, completely untouched. And so one of my mods at the time asked me, it's like, the hell are those made of? It was like, or like, who made those glasses? And I just like looked, and I was like, Nokia, because of the this is a boomer millennial joke, but like the old cell phones that you couldn't were fucking worthless, but you could not break them with a sledgehammer if you tried. So if you had theories on that, please feel free.
My theory would be it's from the same company that makes the Indiana Jones hat. Because no matter what happens, they don't leave the human's body when they go through traumatic events. Nah. It's just they stay on them and in perfect condition.
It's that magic glue.
That is.
that magic, maybe Nokia's been around for 50, 60 years. They've had their fingers in a lot of pies. They've branched out over the years. They can do more than just worthless cell phones.
Oh, funny. That's a hilarious take, though. Yeah, because I can't remember if we talked about that at the office, whether it was something that we wanted to touch up or not. I think it did come down to why her glass is still on her face, and we all just went like, nope,
not touching it.
Hands. No, just walk away. Because a lot of times, things will come up all the time when you're looking at story and looking at cinematics, and we're like, ooh, what about that? and you have to make a lot of choices about, do you just wave your hands and say that's just the way it is, or do you actually address it and try to fix the problem? And it's, at the end of the day, like, these games and these stories are like magic tricks. You know, you get away with as much as you can without actually having to show it or do it. And that's one of those things that, you know, well, the magic trick didn't completely sell in this case, because a few people were like, hold on a second.
Yeah.
But, you know, hopefully enough that the goal is, for me, the first time playing through, if it was just magical and a great experience, then great. But on the first playthrough, if you're like, hold on a second, like every 5 minutes, if there's something, I
remember you saying this last time.
It's like, yeah, it confuses you and it takes you out of the story. But if on your second playthrough or your third playthrough, you're like, wait a minute,
it's like,
that's okay with me.
You made it past the first playthrough. You made it past the true litmus test. Everything afterwards is like, go forth.
Exactly. So,
all right. Yep. Well, that is an end to the questions that I have collected and arranged. So thank you for answering all of those. At this point in time, I will turn it over to you, the community. If you have questions you would like Webb to answer, drop them in the chat. We will pick them up, and I think we got time for that. In the meantime, I would like to showcase a little bit of art from our dear friend Marine, that I think is some of the finest art of True Colors that I've seen. So I'm going to move over to this. This is some of the stuff that, I don't know if you can see this on stream right now, Webb, but Rinx Art, Marine, I actually have a commissioned piece that I got her to do that I think was still in process when we were last interviewing, that was like Max and Chloe meet Vi and Caitlin from Arcane, and they cosplay as each other. It's a favorite picture of mine. I need to figure out how to get it like blown up and put it on a printer, but these are some of the great pieces of artwork that she created.
Marine is awesome. And actually, if hold on, let me grab it.
Do you have a physical copy near you? I meant to grab. I have this one top left corner in a. Oh yeah. That was. I remember seeing that one. That one was so cool.
So Marine made this. So I happened to have both Rihanna and Erica in studio with me one day. We were having lunch together. I'm like, oh, I got my leading ladies with me. Let's take a photo. And we took a photo, and then Marine took it and painted over it and sent me this, and I was like, that's awesome. So I bought this from her on her store, so it was pretty cool.
Oh, she did the Jane Doe shirt as well. It was a nice touch.
Yeah, it's awesome.
These three pieces I picked out for a couple of reasons. The first of which, top left, I actually Erica was doing a signing, and I bought a print of that photo that Erica signed.
Oh, cool.
I have it in my room. I meant to bring it out, but it's like I just love that photo. Or that I keep calling them photos. They're drawings. They're beautiful. The second one is like sort of like a grief process, and this one is like just devastating with Gabe behind Alex, assumedly after he's passed. And the top right one, I can't zoom in on it enough in this one, but it's from the scene with Ducky. If you choose to dance with him, and one of the cool details about this one is in the mirror. If you look in the mirror in the background. It's a reflection of young Ducky and Tabitha, which was like part of what this whole scene is about, is like helping Ducky connect to his departed wife. I love this art. It's beautiful stuff. If you are not familiar with Marine, I put her handle up here, Rinx Art, on Twitter. She's not very active right now because I think she's in medical school. But if you have money to commission art, do it. I commissioned a piece from her and it is beautiful. I believe I put it up on screen last time. But if you have a question about it, I'll always plug that one. All right. I see at least one question, so we will start with the questions that we have here. So first question from Vanna. How do you view Gabe in the final choice scene? Do you see it as Gabe appearing to her from beyond the grave, reasonable to see as there are magic powers in the universe, or do you see it more as Alex's inner monologue?
Yeah, good question. This is my personal opinion on it, which is it's just it's her hearing his advice through her mind. It's just him appearing to her from her mind, because they had a really strong connection that first day, and I don't know. I think that she would channel that, like, what would Gabe say? in her mind with all that, because the other version, again, it adds too much, too many mixed powers or too many mixed things in the same universe, right? It's like at that point, it's like, well, wait, Alex has powers, but then Gabe has powers too. It's like, what is this?
Yeah.
It just makes it more simple. Otherwise,
I will say
that's my opinion. I don't know.
Yeah, I can get behind that for sure. I will say that in the so I call the scene at the end of the original Life is Strange when you're going through all the memories of it. I call that the long walk. So the similar moment for me in this game is I don't have a good name for it yet, but it's at the orphanage itself with Gabe. It's like this game's version of the long walk, and I don't have a good name for it yet. I'll come up with one eventually, something pithy and quippy and good. But like that moment for me, like where Gabe is like talking to her, I personally headcanon that as that actually being Gabe, and that like maybe Alex is on the border of life and death. I think that one for me, I like the idea of that one really being him. Not just because like he's helping her move forward and like it's really helping her and he gets to do it one last time, but I think there's something to the idea of the way people live on after they're gone, both literally and figuratively. But I think it's important that it's ambiguous.
Yeah. And I guess I didn't really think of it until hearing the question, where it's like, oh yeah, you're right, we could be implying one thing or the other. And I just thought it was, again, like you said, it's just ambiguous that he's just there. It just is, and it doesn't mean anything per se. It's just the funny story behind all that. I don't know if I've told you the story yet or not, but so Han learns that he's offed like that.
Yeah.
And he was like, oh, come on, guys, why did you kill me? Like, he's so bummed because he's like, I want to be in there. And so he would be in the office every now and then to do various scenes, obviously through episode 1. And then every time he was in, he would leave little Post-it notes
I do know this story,
in the writer's room saying Gabe lives.
Gabe lives. Yeah, I remember this.
And and he kept on saying, Gabe lives. Like, he would, as a joke, but I think it sunk in because eventually they're like, yeah, let's bring him back. And, because this is back when changing him from an antagonist to an actual really good brother. I think that's kind of where that pivot, like, yeah, we could bring him back because it would be nice to have him help Alex versus going back and maybe doing a bad flashback where he's like awful or something. So yeah, it was nice to actually be able to bring him back and not really think much of it. Just he's just back, which is nice.
I remember the Gabe Live story. That is actually hilarious, and I cannot believe that he willed it into existence. That's phenomenal.
He is a master at that. Like, he is that kind of person where he just power of intention and all that stuff, and it like works. I don't know how he does it, but he is just relentless about it, and it works.
Okay, Wolf Warrior's got a question. Would it be possible to make a game based on the Life is Strange comics of Max and Chloe? It be named Life is Strange After the Storm. That's the name of the comic series. And were there possibly any plans on making Life is Strange game of Max and Chloe instead of the comics? Okay, so I think that second part is like, was the comics like not the original intention? Were there any conversations, I guess, when Square Enix came to you guys about continuing a Max and Chloe story? And of course, NDA understanding.
That's a really good question. Of course. And this is me guessing about how the industry actually works, which is there's an IP, which is Life is Strange. And I don't know legally who owns it and who licenses it, but it may or may not actually be Square Enix. Square Enix may only own the video game rights. I don't know.
Oh, okay.
It's something like that. So,
I'd have to check the comics because I think there might be a credit in there to Square Enix. It's been a while since I've read them.
There might be. Yeah. So somebody said to themselves, I have an idea I want to do a comic. And they went to the person who held the IP and said, hey, we want to make a comic about this. Of course, they had to find their own money, probably. And then the person who had the IP, whether it was Square or like a holder or something outside of that, then had to approve that and say, okay, yes, you can do that. And, you know, you have to pay this royalty fee or whatever the arrangement was. So the fact that it was a comic versus not being a game wasn't really a choice to be made. It was probably approached with, we want to make a comic and here's what it looks like and here's what we want to make. And they just said yes or no. It wasn't like, gee, we want to make something else and we're not sure what we want to do. Do you want to do comic? Do you want to do a trading card set? Do you want to do, like, it wasn't like that kind of conversation.
Yeah.
So again, that's just, I think, the way the industry works in that way.
Yeah, and that's always difficult, like going across different mediums, because I think the authors involved in that, I know Emma Vicelli is either the artist or the author behind that series. And if you haven't read the comics, I do recommend them. It's very sweet. And much in the same way that, like, you know, I finished True Colors and like want to go back and do it again because it doesn't make me existentially perceive my own mortality. Which is a good thing to, you know, experience, you know, maybe, you know, use that to experience ego death once and then don't like put yourself through it a bunch of times. But, you know, in the way that, you know, True Colors gives me that sense of fulfillment, these comics also did tie that up for me in a lot of ways. I really did enjoy the story of them when I read through them. It's really sweet. It's really touching. And you get to see, the thing that I love most about it is the writer, which I think is Emma Vicelli. I could be wrong. Fully understands the speech pattern and syntax of Max and Chloe and Rachel, like, to a T. It's phenomenal. I love reading when people write characters that were performed in voice and like see how they translate that to text, and to really get like the mannerisms that, you know, like Hannah Tell brought into the original performance, or Ashley Birch brought into the original performance, and that syntax that is like really hard to move to strictly text. Let's see. It's fun. If you haven't read it, I do recommend it. Let's see. Question from Damason. What are 6 reasons? I'm assuming this is a typo, but what are 6 reasons that Steph is cool?
I don't know. I can't actually put it into words. It's just, sometimes it's a visceral thing, right? You just have the right concept art, the right voice, the right whatever, and it's just like, that's just badass. Like, how do you qualify that? I like the fact that that she is gay and she's like openly gay. She's like, it's just like, this is just who I am. So she's unapologetic about that, and I think there's a boldness about that I really enjoy her as a character. I'm trying to think what else specifically. She knows what she wants, and she's not scared of asking for it, kind of. Yeah, which is cool. 6 reasons. That's a lot of reasons.
That's a lot. I will say that from my personal experience, because I think Before the Storm set in 2010, if I remember correctly, somewhere abouts.
Probably know better than I'm not sure off the top of my head. Yeah.
I don't remember quite either. The actual years get a little fuzzy for me, but I will tell you from personal experience that every stage manager who I knew in 2010 who was like, I am extremely gay, and was like very blunt as a person, were all the coolest fucking people I knew, right? The first show that I worked on in college, who I think I met in 2009, was this openly like bisexual, very organized like audio tech who was like assistant stage managing. And first off, she was like the chillest person ever. I never heard her like talk too fast, like raise her voice for anything, but she like commanded a room. She went on to be like one of the chief audio engineers of Hamilton, and is still working with them on tour. Like it's one of those things. And I think cool about her sometimes because she is like a fucking inspiration to me. Because then I like approached her when I was a senior to be like, hey, will you audio design a show for me? And she's like, we were like at a party, and we were, you know, it was like a college party, and we were like sitting down, and she's like, what do you want to do? Tell me and explain it to me. And we had like an hour-long conversation at like a theater party about how to design this thing. It did not get passed, so I did not get to work with her, which is a big regret. But that's more on my failings as a director as junior or senior year of college than anything else. And my proposal was bad. But like, Steph reminds me of people I know in real life. You know, like so when I think about Steph, it's like I personally am like, I know that person. They're always the coolest people. We have a question from Vanna. If you could choose a new or previously discussed power to explore in a new game, what power would you find the most fun exploring?
I'm going to answer in a way that is not really answering. So I'm acknowledging that right up front, which is the fact that like I am looking for the power that is just doesn't exist, right? Because it's like, do you have super strength? Do you have, X-ray vision? Do you have telekinesis? Like those have all been done. Again, boring. It's like we've all seen those movies. We've all seen those stories. What is the thing that nobody has done yet? Like that's interesting and compelling. Like I want to look for that where it just like gets you to go, wait, you get to do what?
Yeah.
Holy shit. Like I never thought of that. So breaking that new ground. I don't know what that is, but I wanted to explore those options, whatever those options are.
That's actually, I really like that answer because like that was something for me in the comics. I don't know. Have you read the comics that were?
I have not.
Okay. Without spoiling too much, there are other characters with like new characters with powers in those comics. And I was always curious how they would be handled. And I will say that one person has the ability to essentially perceive multiple timelines, right?
Oh.
So Max is like, her relationship with Max is very fascinating because like Max will do something. She's like, I saw that. And it's like, what? Because she doesn't control time at all. She's just like, I can see that essentially. I might be paraphrasing incorrectly because it's been probably 2 years since I've read them, but that is something I never would have considered in creating a power. It's like one of those things that's like very out there. So that's a very cool thing to create.
That is cool.
Let me scroll.
You said more than, are there other people in? I'm just curious about the comic now. Like what other powers?
Yes,
were
there are
mentioned?
like 2 other people with powers. One of them is named Tristan, and he's fucking awesome. I love him. I cannot remember for the life of me what his power is off the top of my head. I remember. Tristan essentially can not exactly turn invisible, but like disappears. If that makes sense. So like when he is emotionally pressed, he will like vanish. It's really fascinating and it informs his story like really well. And especially the way it ties into like what he's doing is actually more, he's not turning invisible. What he's doing is like slipping out of phase with reality. It's really fascinating. And it's handled really well.
Actually,
and it's not like over sciencey. It's not like over sciencey. We're not in fucking X-Men, right? Because we've talked about this before, right? Like we're not. Yeah. This is not X-Men. This is not. We're not like developing superpowers. It's not BioShock. We're not drinking plasmids and gaining like shock ability. Like it's not that shit, right? Because that takes away from the narrative. It becomes about this instead of the story. Right. So it's not that, and it handles that very well, which was personally one of my fears. I'm scrolling back up through chat because I remember seeing other questions earlier that I want to see.
Actually, I want to take another swing at that existing question because I just thought of something. Which
go ahead.
I would love to see. Have you ever heard that? It's like Party Gamer where it's like, tell me about what is the most useless superhero ability, or whatever. Like if and you're like, you can make tissues catch on fire. But that's it. That's all you can do. Like whatever, like the most
useless superpowers. Yeah, I love it.
Useless superpowers are. It would be a game with that. Like, how do you make a game with people who have useless superpowers?
I love it.
Somehow try to make them useful, and it would be hilarious and fun, and a game that wouldn't have to take itself too seriously.
No.
I think that'd be great.
I found a question.
I have no idea how to make that playable, but okay.
I don't either. I found a question earlier. This is either from Miley Edits or Millie Edits. I don't know how to pronounce that. I'm sorry if I'm butchering it.
Yeah.
Just like the new Five Nights at Freddy's movie came out, could they someday think of making a Life is Strange Before the Storm or True Colors live action? And I actually do want to preface this before you take this out with your opinion, is that if I remember correctly, there have been rumors of something about this, like a live action Life is Strange TV series been floating around for like 7 or 8 years with Shawn Mendes attached to it, which I have mixed opinions about. I'll be honest about that. I have some mixed opinions about that, but that's never been truly confirmed. And no one knows where it is, right? Nobody, like, if it's been in production forever, which doesn't mean shit. Yeah. Like, no castings have ever been announced or anything. So I will say that I have heard of this before. I have heard that this exists.
Right.
I have my own opinions on it, but I'll go ahead and let you take the reins on this one.
You know as much as I do. I remember being mid-production on Before the Storm, and we heard word that it had been optioned to do this is where I talk about those IP rights. Like, I don't know if Square Video Game had control over those rights, or different kinds of rights, and they could be licensed in different ways. So, so we learned about it just like everybody else. And we're like, wait, how are they going to do that? Who are they going to cast? And the thing is completely out of our control. It is like, it's a completely another arm of people who own rights and can license it or whatever. And then we're like, oh crap. And then we waited and kind of clenched and waited, and then nothing happened. And then we totally forgot about it. And apparently
I forget about it like once a year, and then remember it once a year. And I'll like see some random post about it on some forum somewhere, or just like, it's still in the ether. And everything I hear is like, either it's not about Max and Chloe, or if it is taking place at the same time as Max and Chloe, it does not star them, which I think is the right choice for the medium. But you're going to suffer in trying to make that, because of the attachment fans have to this piece of media is so distinctly linked to the individual characters. And I will say, Vanna, that as far as I know about Shawn Mendes, is not that he is playing any character, but that he is in charge of it.
Right.
And in charge of deciding the music for it, which for me is a 50-50, because I think Shawn Mendes has a good understanding of music. I don't think his music is right for any piece of Life is Strange media. It's just not. It's not his fault.
I'm sensing your opinion.
It's not his fault. I actually enjoy listening to his music sometimes, but it's not. The music is the other thing that is like, you listened to me fucking talk about the themes thing earlier. Like, it's so specific, and I think trying to do this without anyone other than someone like Jonathan Morali is a mistake. It's just a mistake. He was so intentional with that first soundtrack. Like, every single person who's played the initial is like, oh yeah, like, to all of you, right? They like, that's right off the bat. They think of that one. It's the first place I heard Sparkle Horse, which is like, a very unique song that, like, I had a friend recommend me Sparkle Horse, and I was like, I asked you for music because I knew you were giving me bands I'd never heard of, but I've actually heard of that one because of a video game that picks like obscure pieces that made sense because it was a art piece. It was like a statement piece, right? The reason the music is that way is because Jonathan Morali was like shaping. I'm doing it again. I'm going about the fucking music again. I gotta stop.
Oh no, you're good. I'm being pulled into it. It's interesting.
I just like that. It's beautiful. It's honestly beautiful. Like and I don't think Shawn Mendes' music is not it. It's not it. It's not his wheelhouse. It's not his wheelhouse. If you told me that like someone from, oh God, what band would I be happy? Metallica. Yeah, perfect.
Metallica, Life is Strange soundtrack. Like, okay, I'd like to see how that would work. But
okay, if you told me like, I'll pick a fairly popular musician or like growing in popularity. Like if Lizzie McAlpine was to say that she was working on designing music for that game, right? I would be more inclined to believe in that than I would whatever Shawn Mendes would offer. That's my thought on that.
Because I'm not familiar. I'm like, I don't know if I know her songs.
I think she got pretty big on TikTok, but she has a lot of like yearny acoustic guitar music.
Yeah.
Which I think is like just niche.
Yeah. We all know kind of what that Life is Strange feel is, and yeah, you can be in the ballpark and be like, oh, okay, I could see that, or not in the ballpark at all and be like, no. Unless you're like a phenomenal songwriter, and you're able to write outside of the songs that you publish yourself, then you could probably be able to do that. But
which there are definitely those people out there, even amongst you wouldn't expect. Like, I mean, Ed Sheeran is probably a great example of someone who wrote for multiple musicians, right? He one of Justin Bieber's biggest hits is a Ed Sheeran song, right? Or Avril Lavigne is actually a great example. Kelly Clarkson's biggest hit is an Avril Lavigne song that she wrote. Breakaway.
Prince. Like Prince had his own music, but he wrote tons of stuff for other people, apparently. So,
like that kind of stuff is also very cool, and I love talking about that stuff because I do love music. I can't scroll up high enough to find the questions that were dropped in the earliest part of stream because chat deletes itself after a certain point, unfortunately. So there might be questions that I'm missing. If you do have a question you can think of, go ahead and drop it here. Webb, I'm going to gift you an answer in the future that you can use because I've seen a couple of your interviews and I know this question comes up to you a lot, which is how did Alex survive the fall, right? I've seen that one pop up like every time you talk about the game. Someone always asks that. I'm going to give you my personal theory, and you are free to use it forever.
Your theories, because they've been like really good so far. Good instincts.
Okay. Part of this theory comes from my personal desire to have. There's a narrative rule of that villains often create their own downfalls, right? They are responsible for the thing that brings them down eventually. I love this idea in narrative. I think it's a very balanced narrative device. When Jed goes to this moment where he's like, I have to kill her and put her down the well so no one's ever gonna, or the vent so no one ever sees her again. No one knows what happened to her. He goes to shoot her. Whether it's his own guilt or Alex's movement, he doesn't actually get the bullet through her. It grazes her. But if you've ever experienced a live fire, more than the bullet comes out of a gun. A blast of exhaust and force comes out, and pressure. And even with the grazing of the bullet, that isn't enough to like obviously penetrate the skull, but what it does do is its force. It's like getting hit in the face really, really hard. And when you get hit in the face really, really hard, you're probably gonna, go like half unconscious at the very least.
Mm-hmm. There
are stories of people who get like blackout drunk and walk out of fourth floor buildings and hit the ground entirely fine. And the reason for that is because, same thing with like why drunk drivers survive crashes more often than the people who are sober behind the wheel, is because
I see where you're going.
The reflex of seeing what's coming and tensing and having the automatic reaction to it makes the body rigid. So when that person steps out of the fourth floor and they're drunk and they don't have that reaction, they hit the ground, and instead of tensing, they just collapse into it. They'll still get hit with a bunch of force, but it is not the rebound through them that is what kills people who would not have been in that state. Alex, not conscious, hits all of these things on the way down. And even so, like, she stops at halfway. That takes some of the problem, right? That takes some of the distance of the height of the shaft. Same thing again when she falls down. You're not like conscious. You're not reacting. You're not tensing. You're not bracing for impact. You are you are ragdolling. I think Alex survived because rather than just push her down, Jed brought the gun to shoot her, but failed. That's how I tend to think about it. So you're welcome to take that whenever someone asks you that again, because I've seen that one come up a bunch, and I know that's always one of those ones where you're like, hand of fate. I don't know. It happened. Yep. So you have free license to use that one from here on out.
Because it's realistic. You're right. If you're unconscious, you're ragdoll, and ragdoll people do survive more because they're not tensing up and making it worse. So, and I also think that, like, I guess in my headcanon is, we have that shot of her just kind of falling through the black. But I see that as more of an artistic representation of what's happening in her mind versus reality, because she isn't falling into like, and it's just really visually compelling. But like in my mind is like she hit 20 branches on the way down, right? Like that there may have been other things that she hit, and then that was just the one that caught her, and that those other things kind of dislodged and fell. So I don't know. I think that her fall was broken by other things along the way.
And that's also definitely like something that is like very good and reasonable to do, and makes a ton of sense to me. And again, that is a beautiful shot. Once again, that is NAVGTR 2022 Award for Outstanding Camera Direction in a Game Engine. A rare and specific award, but that shot certainly like brings that one home.
That falls into it, for sure.
I didn't even see the Steam Award one. I'm looking at the awards page again. Steam Awards nominated for Outstanding Story-Rich Game.
Yeah, I remember when that came around, where everybody's like, vote,
Yeah,
especially at the studio when we can do voting, we like charge up the Slack channel and be like, everybody go vote.
And that was just to touch back on this, like that we started off the conversation with it. That was a thick year for video game density. Because that is the year
good game.
Cyberpunk came out that year. Resident Evil Village came out that year. What else? Halo Infinite came out. Valheim came out that year. Jesus. No Man's Sky,
I know
Rust.
Unpacking was a small one, but like Unpacking was because they were at. I think about the award ceremonies. All the awards where we saw the same people over and over again.
It Takes Two.
Yeah, It Takes Two.
Oh my God, yeah. So you probably saw these guys all over the place, like
Ratchet and Clank game for PS5 that was out around the same time.
Deathloop, Inscription, like
yep.
This was all 2021, like, and I mean, just wild to think how many of these. Yeah, because Ratchet and Clank, Returnal. I forgot about Returnal. I haven't played a lot of these games, but I remember all these titles. Kenna, Bridge of Spirits, right? That was a big name, especially in titles, of narrative titles. The Guardians of the Galaxy game, which I don't know how it was reviewed. Sable was that year. Like you had a stacked roster of games to go up against, like everything in every category across like 18 different award shows, and still walked with like 5 or 6 big ones. That's impressive.
The biggest one for us was always Resident Evil Village. Every time, like Maggie just swept with acting across the board, and it was always like, well, yep, okay. Because she's just bigger than life. Like her character and her performance was just like very it's just big, right? And versus Alex, with our games are very just grounded and normal, so it's harder to be flashy.
I haven't played that Resident Evil yet. I've seen some gameplay of it, but I haven't played it. But it's just like this. Just remind me correctly. I think this is correct that Erica and Han, this was their first video game, right? Or at least their first like big studio video game. And I'm looking at the BAFTAs list against who they were up against. Like Maggie was obviously, Han was up against Maggie in the supporting role performer category for Lady D. Performer in a supporting role also had Laura Bailey nominated for Call of Duty Vanguard. And Jennifer Hale was up for Ratchet and Clank in the performer against Erica. Like, and neither of them won either. Yeah. None of the people I just named won, right? It went to Returnal for lead role and Psychonauts for like supporting role. So it was like stood up among giants, and even the giants did not win that year.
Yep.
That is,
because I know like Maggie. I mean, she was first timer too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I remember talking about that with her at DICE, and she's like, "Oh yeah, this is my first gig." I was like, "Wait, what?" I mean, she's of course been acting, but like as far as big, got signed, boom, big. But Erica, she hadn't actually done anything other than high school. Like this was her first like acting gig, and that was. Cause I remember her auditioning, and we were like, "Wait, like she didn't have anything, like she didn't have a resume or reel or anything," and we're like. Wait, you've never done anything before and you're this good? It was crazy. Everybody in the room just couldn't believe that she just had that much natural talent. So
that's
really
incredible. Cool. That's such a great find.
And Han's been like, his IMDb is filled with stuff because he's been in all sorts of serials and films and whatnot. But he wanted to make a video game. That was like his. He set an intention. I want to make a video game this year, and he, we've talked about that. How he actually went to an audition at a local, the Colorado Film School. Mm-hmm. They had open auditions, and he wanted to go there in order to kind of give back and be in like some student productions. And I happened to be there watching open auditions, and I saw him, took note of him, and then later we needed an Asian man for the role, and I'm like, oh, make sure we invite this guy to audition for us. And he ended up getting the role. So it's like a small world and the small little decisions you make. And it's funny how it all plays out. And also funny anecdotal. In the original auditions for Alex and Gabe, Erica and Han auditioned together.
Yeah, I've heard that story too. And that's just like.
And then Han said after it was over, he's like, well, I'll see you on set. And she was like, okay, sure, whatever, dude. And like, but that's him. Like the power of positive attention is like, nope, we got this. You nailed it. I nailed it. We got this gig. And she's like, okay, dude, whoever you are. Like,
amazing.
Yeah.
Once again, sorry, just one more thing that I want to say. Once again, I'm looking up, I think, how many video games have won a Peabody? I don't think it's very many, right?
Oh yeah, good point. I don't know. I just know it's a very high-end award.
And I'm looking at like the immersive and interactive honorees, and this is like, you know, up there with like frickin' New Yorker and the ContraPoints journalists. So it's like that was, again, another class to stand amongst and just be like somewhat, it's just being on a different level. And I think that's, you brought something unique to this table and honest, and I think that's recognized across the board by everybody. And I do want to call back one thing that you said last time we talked. I think one of your answers to the 10 questions is like, one thing you wanted to do was create something that the one thing I think with the question is like, what would you like to be told, or what would you like to hear, is like something, you created something positive and people were affected positively by it. And so I will speak for myself, and I assume at least several of the people in chat. It's like this particular game is one that has had, I mentioned why before, but had a very positive effect on my life at a time where I needed to have a positive effect on my life for a multitude of reasons. And I think doing something in creation that is honest and unique does that for people. And so I think you do that. And I think if you continue to do that, then the number of people that tell you that is going to skyrocket exponentially.
Cool. Well, thank you for saying that. That's nice. And yeah, thank you for saying that. Yeah, I don't want to ever stop though, thinking, okay, I did my thing, I can stop now. Like I don't think I'll ever be satisfied that I've done enough good or have tried hard enough to do enough good. So yeah, I'm going to keep on trying.
Absolutely. All right. Once again, Webb, thank you so much for coming to join me here on the channel. I'd like to just go ahead and say this right now. I'd like to invite you back after we go through Telltale the Expanse to have a similar conversation about that game, because I've seen some playthrough for it. I'm really excited for it.
Sure.
And I always enjoy talking with you. It's a great time.
Yeah, it's always a good time. I appreciate you inviting me to come on. I haven't been streaming in like, I don't know, however long. So it's nice to kind of just be out here again and talking to everybody and seeing everybody. So
for sure.
Thank you.
This has been an interview with Webb Pickersgill of Deck 9 Games, co-game director for Life is Strange Before the Storm, performance director for Life is Strange 2 Colors, and the studio motion capture director for Telltale the Expanse. Thank you for coming on the channel. We will see you on the next time. And chat, thank you so much for being here, providing the lovely questions that we get to have this conversation with a video game designer, both from the narrative perspective and from the behind the scenes perspective, and someone who also loves stories just like we do. I hope you guys have a good rest of your evening. As far as this channel goes, we are back tomorrow afternoon with Emotional Damage Sundays. Something started because of Life is Strange, appropriately enough. I don't know what we're playing off the top of my head, but 2 p.m. EST, come by then. I'd love to see you all there. Have a great night, everybody, and well, see you again.